All righty. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission this Wednesday evening, May 14th. I now call the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Well, all right. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Certainly. Commissioner Robbins?
Here.
Commissioner Michael?
Here.
Chair Narita?
Here.
Commissioner Owinski?
Here.
And Commissioner Krantz will be remote.
Okay, and so at this time, I would like to ask the clerk if any notifications or requests for virtual meeting participation have been received from any members of the commission due to just cause or emergency circumstances.
Yes, Commissioner Krantz would like to make a request. Commissioner Krantz, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rich Kranz. I'm a commissioner, and I am requesting to participate remotely under emergency circumstances as I am unable to attend in person due to medical reasons. I confirm that I will have both audio and video on throughout the entire meeting, and there will be no individual over the age of 18 present in the room with me.
Great. So at this point, could I call for a motion to accept Commissioner Kranz's request to participate remotely?
So moved.
Second. Oh,
Commissioner Robbins?
Aye.
Vice Chair Michael?
Yes.
Chair Narita?
Yes.
And Commissioner Owinski?
yes.
Passes 4-0. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Commissioner Kranz. We're delighted to have you participate remotely.
Okay, and thank you for the accommodation. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, so welcome. We are excited to be here in person with options for those who choose to not be in person to still participate virtually. For those attending in person, please complete a yellow request to speak slip and hand it to the clerk. If participating remotely, use the raise your hand feature in Zoom and you will be called on at the appropriate time. If calling in via phone, press *9 to raise your hand, and when called upon, press *6 to unmute. These options for public comment will remain available until I close the public comment period for that specific item. Okay, with that, Madam Clerk, could you please read the consent calendar?
Certainly. It is the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission regular meeting minutes approval for the commission meeting of April 9th.
And are there any members of the commission who would like to pull an item from the consent calendar? Okay, great. With that, could I get a motion to accept the consent calendar?
I motion to accept the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Commissioner Robbins?
Aye.
Vice Chair Michael?
Yes.
Chair Narita?
Yes.
Commissioner Owinski?
Yes.
And Commissioner Krantz?
Yes.
Perfect. Motion passes 5-0.
Wonderful. All right, next up is public comment. Members of the public wishing to comment on any item not appearing on the agenda may address the commission at this time. State law prevents the commission from taking action on any matter not on the agenda. Your comments may be referred to staff for follow-up. This public comment section is generally limited to a total of 15 minutes. However, that is subject to the commission's discretion and can be extended if commission wishes to do so. And one more note, we welcome speakers providing public comment, but please be advised this is a limited public forum. As such, speakers must stay on topic if speaking to a particular agenda item, and if speaking during general public comment, they must address matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. If speakers fail to follow these rules, they will be warned, and if they continue to disregard our rules, their opportunity to speak will be ended. All right, and so with that, we have general public comment, right?
Correct.
Great. Do we have anyone for general public comment?
I need to ask someone online for
Okay.
clarification.
Great.
Hi, Carol. I'm going to ask you really quick. Are you wanting to speak to general public comment, or are you wanting to speak to a specific item on our agenda?
This is a general comment.
A general comment? Perfect. So we have one general.
Great. Carol, you'll have 3 minutes.
Great, thanks.
Hi, Carol. Hold on one quick second while we have the timer started. I will give you a heads up.
Oh, is it on?
Not yet.
Just give
If
us one
All
more.
right,
There
Carol.
you go. Can you see it, Carol?
I think I do. If I go over, it'll be by a second. This is a
Okay,
short
go ahead.
comment. So
Okay.
as you might remember or not, I'm Carol Steinfeld, co-chair of the Water Committee of the Loma Prieta chapter of the Sierra Club, and that is your chapter. So a request for action and a little background. Tomorrow night, there is a BOSCA meeting, and you remember that's the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency. This one will be at the College of San Mateo at 6:30 p.m., Building 10. BOSCA will be discussing its 2025-2026 work plan. As you know, we don't have a lot of democratic input in BOSCA. San Mateo's board member is a Cal Water employee, and he almost never asks questions or comments at meetings. So regarding the work plan, a coalition of community organizations, including the Tuolumne River Trust and Sierra Club, is calling on BOSCA to make sure the work plan includes a deep dive public workshop on its voluntary agreement, VA. And I did send you an email about this, although I have some corrections, that SFPUC, San Francisco Public Utility Commission, proposes as an alternative to the State Water Board's proposed Bay Delta plan. What BOSCA doesn't like, or SFPUC really doesn't like, is that the plan requires leaving enough water, 40%, in the Tuolumne River. And that's just in the event of an 8-year drought, which we have yet to have. The former BOSCA director, Nicole Sankula, chose to support that voluntary agreement. The BOSCA board members know very little about the voluntary agreement, which they call the VA. And an outgoing BOSCA board member from Menlo Park even told us she knew nothing of its details. It's actually very complex, and assure her fellow board members did not either. So we would like two things, and if there's any way you as individuals or as the commission can send an email to BOSCA or attend the meeting, here's what we're asking. Number one, set aside time in the work plan for a public session to explain the voluntary agreement proposed. The VA they've proposed has been criticized by many groups and aquatic biologists. So SFPUC did this at our urging a couple years ago. This would be a session, like a 1-hour session explaining the voluntary agreement. We don't think the board members know anything about it. Number two is simply to drop its expensive litigation against the state. It's already been litigated. This is an appeal. Here's what you
Carol,
should.
you're at time. So thank you so much for that public comment. Do we have anyone else for public comment? General public comment?
That is it.
Okay. Staff, are you able to follow up with Carol on her request? I don't know where this goes within the city, but just if someone could circle back with her, because it's not on the agenda, so commission can't respond. Thank
Yes,
you.
we can get her information offline if she can follow up with us, and we can route it through the proper channels.
Yeah, there's an email to the SIC commission on this. So if someone on staff could handle it, that would be great. Thank you.
Through the chair, I'll
Yeah.
have Matt follow up with her. I forwarded the email.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Okay. So that was general public comment. Next item of this new business. The first item on our agenda is called Electrify San Mateo Sustainable Building Strategy Feedback. And with us today is our wonderful staff, Andrea, and consultant from Rincon. And I forget your name, sir. I'm sorry. Ryan. Nice to see you again, Ryan. All right. Over to you for staff presentation.
Great, thank you. All right, good evening, Commission and members of the public. My name is Andrea Chow. I'm the Sustainability Analyst with the City of San Mateo. I'm accompanied by Ryan Gardner from Rincon Consulting, and we're here to present on a project, Electrify San Mateo. Our goal tonight is to provide more background and overview of building electrification and how the project has progressed thus far. So there's been a lot of work completed over this past year. And then the bulk of the presentation is going to review the different existing building electrification policy pathways. There are 5 policy pathways that we're asking for commission feedback and direction on this evening. So we'll spend a lot of our presentation reviewing those 5. I'm going to turn it to Ryan for the bulk of our presentation.
Thank you, Andrea. Pleasure to be here again and to provide an update on where we are with the Electrify San Mateo project. Just a little recap on what we're working on and what some of the goals were. Really the point of the work over the last 2 years have been to develop an actionable roadmap with concrete steps for the city of San Mateo to electrify its existing buildings. We wanted to align this approach with the city's climate goals, but also balance costs and other impacts that could crop up as part of this process. Throughout, we've been trying to use the best available data and the best science to guide our policies. And we've really tried to listen to the community, engage early and often, and have conducted 2 phases of community outreach, which I'll summarize tonight. At this point, we probably all know what building electrification is, but just a little recap. We're really talking about replacing natural gas fired equipment with electric equipment. Things like swapping out gas furnaces for heat pump HVACs, which provide heating and cooling, switching from gas water heaters to heat pump hot water heaters, gas stoves to induction stoves, and gas clothes dryers to electric dryers, which could be electric resistance or increasingly heat pump as well. And just a reminder, what is really cool about heat pumps is they're about 400% efficient. So a 1 kilowatt hour of electricity can create 4 kilowatt hours worth of heating, which is great and helps with our cost effectiveness. Why are we doing this? Really, the primary reason is addressing climate change. By 2030, we expect nearly 40% of emissions in the city to come from natural gas, 38% in 2030, and then increasing by 2045 to 39%. And this is really because other sources of emissions are already decarbonizing. We have 100% carbon-free electricity from Peninsula Clean Energy. So that natural gas is going to stay there and have the same emission factor over time. Other benefits include community health. Natural gas appliances release nitrous oxides and other air pollutants, which can impact asthma, especially in childhood or children. We've also get a benefit of energy affordability. We'll go over this more through the presentation, but average households today will save money on bill after electrification. And we expect gas rates to increase over time and outpace electricity rates. We're already seeing this. The updated savings analysis conducted by Peninsula Clean Energy and Silicon Valley Clean Energy showed increased savings a year later. And that's because gas rates are increasing faster than electric rates. There's also safety benefits. Electricity does not create carbon monoxide when it's burnt, so you don't need venting for your HVAC or your water heater or dryer. And you can add extra resilience to your home by adding solar or battery and have kind of a small microgrid at your own house. And then there's also this added benefit potentially of equity. This isn't a given, but if we do this in the right way and channel the funding and financing and other programs to areas of the city that have been underinvested in, buildings that have been underinvested in, there's an opportunity to help out and improve the equity of our buildings and residents. And tonight we're going to talk a lot about costs. It's at the top of everyone's mind. But I think it's important to contextualize the costs we're going to talk about for making infrastructure upgrades with the costs we're already seeing from climate change. This is why we're doing this work. If you look at the city of Los Angeles fires, we're looking at $250 billion in damage that we're going to have to pay for. And added to that is things like the San Diego floods, which, was not even a large story, but $1.4 billion in damages and multiple other large fires, floods, big storms that are being driven by climate change. And of the ways to decarbonize buildings, building electrification is the most cost-effective strategy, and that's why we are focused on it. To put this again in a legislative context, San Mateo is not alone in looking at these programs. Cities across the state are also working on electrification. The Bay Area Air District, formerly the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, or BACMed, has a zero NOx space and water heating requirement that will be phasing in over the next several years. Starting in 2027, you will no longer be able to purchase or install a natural gas water heater under 80 gallons within the 9-county Bay Area. And that same regulation will come into effect in 2029 for furnaces. And then after that, some larger commercial equipment comes online as well. The city itself has a new construction REACH code that currently heavily incentivizes all electric construction. And in your climate action plan, two of the largest drivers of greenhouse gas reductions are all electric new construction and then decarbonizing existing buildings. So these two strategies are absolutely critical to reaching our climate goals. We work on climate action plans around the state, and there really is no way to reach our targets without getting a significant amount of gas out of our existing buildings. This project has been going on since the summer of 2023. We started by identifying a huge range of potential policy options, doing a deep dive on the building inventory and market segmentation, or looking at what pieces of equipment are available currently. We conducted a first phase of outreach and engagement that was really focused on understanding the kind of overall vision for this project and some of the goals of the community, and then refined our initial list of policies into a draft list. We then came to this commission and to City Council to get feedback, and we're directed to take our 5 policy strategies, go back out to the community and get more detailed feedback and provide more detail on the costs and some of the other factors around these policies. So through spring of 2025, we've been doing exactly that, and going to having in-person and virtual events, completing surveys, and then coming back out to a variety of commissions and eventually City Council with our 5 strategies or 5 policy pathways with more information, and to get final kind of direction for our public review draft of the strategy, which we're hoping to bring to City Council later this summer. So as I said, phase 1 of community engagement, we did our Sustainability Infrastructure Commission meeting. We went to several general plan town hall meetings, conducted an online survey and got feedback from City Council. And then in phase 2, we really focused on these 5 policy pathways that we're going to discuss in a second, and really tried to understand what the specific current concerns were for the community, and then look at how we could address those either through the policies themselves or through supportive actions. We conducted an in-person and a virtual community feedback meeting. We did a commercial building performance standard focus group with commercial building owners within the city. We did presentations at partner meetings and community meetings, conducted another online survey, and now are going out through our commission meetings. And the 5 policy pathways that we looked at is business as usual, which is continuing to electrify new construction, and then also looking for providing information, engagement, and outreach around to improve voluntary adoption of electrification projects. Option 2 is reach codes for renovations. There are several policies in here that we looked at. We'll talk about a bit more, but really looking at the time of replacement of certain cost-effective equipment, and at times when the building is already undergoing a large renovation over, 75,000 or similar number threshold. Option 3 is moving faster than the Bay Area Air District on their zero NOx equipment requirements. Option 4 is commercial building performance standards. So starting to look at how do we decarbonize complicated commercial buildings over time? We'll talk more about that policy in a bit. And then finally, the municipal electric first policy, which would really just focus on municipal buildings like City Hall. And when we talked about these different policy options, and really throughout phase 1 and 2 of engagement, these are the primary community concerns. Far and away, the biggest concern is cost. Installation costs are kind of the upfront costs. How much is this going to cost me to install a heat pump hot water heater versus installing a like-for-like gas replacement? Installation of electric infrastructure upgrades are challenges. So if I do replace my hot water heater, what is the impact on my electric panel or my electric service? Am I going to have to do a bunch of extra work to get my house ready to do this electrification? And then on-bill costs. After I electrify all this stuff, isn't electricity more expensive? Isn't my bill going to go up? And this is going to cost me over time as well. And then beyond cost, we also heard concerns about grid reliability. What happens when the power goes out? Are we going to, destroy the grid because we're demanding so much electricity? Are we going to have blackouts and brownouts because of this? And then finally, a lack of education. Even advocates and folks who are really, driving for having more requirements are also saying, hey, we need help doing this. It's technical work. If you're not familiar with it, it can be hard to go out and have this new work done because of these new technologies. And I'm going to focus on these bottom 3 right now, and because they kind of are similar answers across all the policies. And then as we go through policy by policy and talk about the results, we'll talk more about the specific installation costs and the impacts on grid infrastructure and electrical infrastructure. So the on-bill cost impacts, I mentioned this a little bit earlier on. The good news is that, again, Silicon Valley Clean Energy and Peninsula Clean Energy conducted a large modeling exercise using real data from their customers and determined that the average household is going to save about $20 a month when they switch to a heat pump water heater, and about $20 a month when they switch to a heat pump HVAC. Combined, it's around $30 a month because those things don't exactly stack. Depending on how electric rates work. But we see a savings after electrification. With electric stoves and electric dryers, there's really no net change or a slight increase, but it's kind of covered by these savings of the larger and more efficient appliances. It is really important that you choose the right electric rate. So if you have an electric vehicle or you have an electric, a gas or a heat pump water heater or HVAC, you should be on the E-elec rate. That will improve your savings. So definitely something to look at. And again, this is today. These numbers are expected to increase. So we're expecting to save more money over time as gas rates outpace electric rates. And that's because the way we pay for gas infrastructure is through the gas that gets sold. So we finance the upgrades up front, install all the infrastructure, and then the utility charges, for that gas over time to pay for it. So we have all this infrastructure in the ground that needs to get paid for by selling gas. And the amount of gas we're selling is going down every year because of efficiency and now electrification. So those rates are expected to increase over time. The other big thing that we looked into is grid reliability. So the short answer is yes, if we electrify all our vehicles and all of our buildings, we're going to have to invest in the grid. Currently, the CPUC, the CEC, the utilities, so the folks who kind of manage the grid, are planning around a 27% increase by 2035 in peak electricity demand. Especially with building electrification, the impacts are relatively minor to the grid. When we're adding electricity demand is mostly during the winter because of the electric heating. But our peak is in the summer, and the winter peak is not expected to pass that summer peak. So the grid is relatively stable for that load. Vehicle electrification is significant and will require upgrades. And that is what we're planning around. And as long as we continue to plan and continue to upgrade our grid over time, these impacts are not going to happen overnight. We're phasing them in as equipment is replaced, and we should be able to continue to manage that. And I think it's also important to point out that California hasn't had a demand-related blackout in about 20 years. The grid is really good at managing its load. And most of the outages we have are from local issues like trees and squirrels and things like that are, physically breaking wires. And it's important to remember that water heaters and HVACs and dryers, even if they're gas, don't work without electricity. So we're really not losing a ton of resilience. Gas stoves do work, but their ventilation systems don't. So there are health impacts of just running your gas stove with no ventilation. The third piece is educational resources. You are very lucky to be in Peninsula Clean Energy's region. They have a ton of resources to help people through this process. Everything from a do-it-yourself page where they'll provide you the rebates and the incentives, a contractor search tool, project cost estimates, and a resources library, all the way up to full service installation where a PCE contracted contractor will come out and do this work at a pre-negotiated fixed price. So everything from you can figure it out on your own and get your own quotes to you can just have a full service installation. And then there's also the personalized support. So this is a huge benefit. A lot of regions don't have this benefit and this amount of support. So education is really well covered here, especially. Okay. So with a little bit of background, I am now going to get into the 5 pathways that we looked at in more detail and talk about both the cost impacts, the electric infrastructure impacts, and what we heard from the community. So option 1, business as usual. Continue to adopt new construction REACH codes. There is a new code coming up in 2026, so adopted at the end of this year. And adopting a new version of your new building electrification requirement could save up to 1,000 or so metric tons of CO2e per year by 2030. This is going to represent about $7,500 in savings per unit when compared to a code compliant mixed fuel building, and not cost any more money in electric infrastructure. What you can do is take some of those savings and expand the solar array, and you'll get even more savings on bill over time. This is really one of the few no-brainer win-win situations that we have for addressing climate. And it showed in our community engagement support. We had, a majority of folks supporting or neutral, with around 40% or so not supporting. Option 2 is REACH codes for renovations. So the first code, more specific code we're going to talk about is air conditioner to heat pump. So most air conditioners are heat pumps, but they only work in one direction. So they just take warm air out of your house and put in cold air. Installing a 2-way heat pump instead of an air conditioner when you're going to replace your air conditioner could be anywhere from the same price. So the estimate for a new central AC is somewhere around $10,000. For about that same price, you can install a two-way heat pump. Peninsula Clean Energy conducted a study and found that it could cost up to $1,500 more to install a two-way heat pump. So they have a $1,500 rebate to eliminate that increased cost. The benefit of this, instead of beyond having both heating and cooling from your HVAC, is that because of the BACMED or the Bay Area Air District rules, starting in 2029, if your gas furnace goes out, you'll have to replace it with a electric version. That could cost upwards of $10,000 in incremental costs to do that work. And if you have already replaced your AC with a two-way heat pump, you already have a heater and you will not need to replace it with a furnace. So there's the potential that this saves significant dollars down the line. There's also no additional electric infrastructure costs because it uses the same 220 electrical circuit as your air conditioner would have. So any work you would have needed to do to add an air conditioner, or if you already have an air conditioner, the heat pump can just kind of plug and play right in. And we estimate that this policy would save around 2,200 metric tons per year by 2030, assuming that folks stop using their furnace and use their heat pump instead. The other policy that we looked at for renovations was this flex path. This targets buildings that are undergoing significant retrofits. So if you're pulling a permit, a building permit for over some amount of money, we have $75,000 here. That could be $100,000. It could be $150,000. That would be up for determination when we did the actual ordinance. Those folks would have to pick one of several options for energy efficiency or electrification. Those options are modeled by the statewide codes and standards group, and they have to be shown to be cost effective. The cost of them up front is somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000. That's around 0.5% to 1% of the project cost, but they all have annual bill savings and have to pay back before the end of life of that appliance or that particular upgrade. So you could do things like add a little bit more floor insulation. You could add a heat pump hot water heater. You could do duct sealing. There's different options. And if you had already done one of those things, you would be out of the program. And because there's non-electrification requirements options here, we assume that there would be no additional electrification or electric infrastructure costs, because if those were high, you could just do something different. And this could save you about 730 metric tons a year by 2030 based on the rate of renovations and the fact that some buildings wouldn't have to do this because they already had solar or a heat pump or something like that. This one was also relatively popular. There's kind of throughout all of these, you'll see the same trend where there's really strong support. There's also folks who don't support. This one was more on the positive side with more folks supporting or neutral. The other thing that I'll point out, and I meant to do this ahead of time, but this is just one piece of data that we got from our survey. It helps that it's easy to visualize survey results, but we're also taking into account the rest of the engagement material that we had through the in-person workshops and voting and emails, but generally kind of follow the structure of these survey results. Okay, so option 3 is the zero NOx equipment requirements. And again, this would be going faster than the Bay Area Air District's requirements. This policy has the most significant greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So if all we cared about was reducing emissions, this one does almost 10,000 metric tons by 2030, assuming we start in 2027. So this would collect any new water heater or any new furnace installed after that date. And And again, yeah, would just capture the most pieces of equipment. On the water heater side, installing a heat pump water heater costs around $6,000 on average. PCE has a $2,500 rebate, and currently the federal tax credit is $2,000. It's very unclear about how much federal tax credits are going to continue to be available. This one is available. I just got it. It still works, but who knows for how long. So that would put you at $1,500 out of pocket. The cost of a gas water heater, based on the same database that we use to pull the heat pump water heater, is around $2,800. So if these incentives hold, you can have a net savings by switching to a heat pump water heater, but it's based on those rebates. Because you're adding an electric appliance where there used to be a gas one, there is a potential that if you have a small electric panel under 100 amps, you could need to do a panel upgrade, which would trigger a larger cost. The $6,000 does include, though, the full like new circuit that you would need to run. Those cost around $1,000. On the HVAC side, the costs are higher and the incentives are lower. So if you're installing a heat pump HVAC, so again, this is your space heating and cooling appliance, you're looking at around $18,000 to do that project for, one of these. $1,500 rebate from Peninsula Clean Energy. And there is a $1,000 kicker for low and moderate income, which brings us to $2,500. But for medium and higher income, it's going to be $15,000, minus the federal tax credit, which again has an asterisk. And we're looking at $14,000. A furnace replacement is going to be around $6,000. But if you include the cost of adding an air conditioner as well, we get closer to parity with around $13,600. But we're looking at an incremental cost of between $8,000 and a few $100s. And it really just depends on if air conditioner is kind of packaged together with that. Again, this could trigger a panel upgrade, especially if you're doing multiple projects and adding an electric vehicle, and that would add that additional $3,500 for the panel. I will say that there is new research, or I guess at this point it's been out a little while. UCLA conducted a huge study of what they think is almost every building in the state, and they're estimating around like a 5 or 6% need to upgrade panels in residential buildings. Slightly higher in low income buildings. And again, that's because those buildings, a lot of them are in redlined areas. They just haven't been upgraded as much. So that's more like 10%. This was the kind of least popular policy. Still high support, 45%, but definitely more in the do not support and less in the neutral and not sure. So I think this policy overall from the community and the commissions kind of raised the most red flags, especially around the HVAC cost. Okay, option 4. And again, all those ones we just went over would only be triggered by if you're already doing work on your house, right? Like there's no requirement to just rip something that's functioning out and put something else in. They're all like your gas stuff breaks, you're doing a big renovation. Now we're gonna try to make some upgrades. Commercial building performance standards work a little bit differently. On the residential side, almost everyone has the same stuff in their house. They've got a 60 to 80 gallon water heater. They've got a furnace. It's all pretty similar. You get a few outliers, but not many. On the commercial space, it's kind of the opposite. And every building is like a new, interesting setup that makes it really challenging to do costing on. It makes it also really difficult to have like a prescriptive requirement. So what a building performance standard does is you spend the first couple of years just benchmarking. So the building does a report and it says, this is how much natural gas we use, this is how much electricity we used, and this is how big our building is. From that, you can generate like an emissions per square foot number. And you do that for a couple of years. Building owners can do this themselves, or they could hire a consultant. We've done this before. We charge like $3,000 or something. It's not a huge cost, but a lot of buildings just do it themselves. Then starting in year 2 to 4, you do a retro commissioning project. And this is where an engineer comes to your building and looks at all of your different pieces of equipment. And oftentimes what they find is stuff that's oversized and running way too much for what the building actually needs, or they'll find louvers that are stuck open, and a lot of just inefficiencies. So they'll give you a report, they'll fix a bunch of stuff. Oftentimes that helps reduce your energy and saves quite a bit of money. That costs around 30 cents a square foot to have an engineer do that. And then starting in year 4 or after that, the city would set some thresholds. And some of the ways you could do this is either set a citywide average for medium offices that says, okay, average throughout the city is 10 kilowatt hours per square foot. But some buildings are 1 and some are 100. So those ones that are 100 would need to make improvements and get below the threshold. And really that would just target our least efficient buildings to have to come up to the average for the city. And over time, you could drop that down and kind of push the entire building stocks towards carbon neutrality. This, again, because of all those variables, is really hard to give like how much emissions this is going to save. But in 2019, commercial building natural gas accounted for 83,660 metric tons. So a fairly large number compared to some of the other numbers we've seen. But by 2030, likely we would get no reductions from this program because it's going to take that long to ramp up and go through all these steps to get all the data and the information we need to do this cost effectively and accurately. And I kind of talked through all of these things, but really the benefit here is that it's a flexible path. We can achieve cost savings through increased efficiency, and a lot of cities are doing this. There's several here in the Bay Area with Brisbane and the city of Berkeley and city of San Jose. And there's also a statewide rule that already requires buildings over 50,000 square feet to do that benchmarking. And we would likely target that similar square footage threshold. So this is work they're already doing or should be doing. We don't see a ton of enforcement from the state, but much better when cities take this on themselves. I think Brisbane has like a 99% or 100% benchmarking rate, which is great. This one was really popular. I think part of it is we talked to a lot of folks who own residential buildings and not commercial buildings. But we also had a commercial building working group and really positive feedback. They had great ideas on how to tailor this, maybe make some changes to make it a little bit more easy to implement for them, but generally not a lot of red flags on this approach overall. And then finally, the municipal electric first policy. This would require city facilities to transition to electric equipment upon replacement. We would probably have a exemption for infeasible projects if it was just like needed to get done and was not cost effective, or like just did not have a piece of equipment available. And really this is about showing leadership from the city side. If we're asking the community to do it, the city should be doing it as well. We don't have an up-to-date municipal inventory, but in 2005, city facilities emitted about 586 metric tons of CO2 from natural gas. We could probably get through about a quarter of that by 2030, so maybe in the 145 metric ton range. This one was also really popular. Not a lot of folks against this, mostly neutral or support. So just a little summary, business as usual, about 1,000 metric tons of CO2 reduction, cost savings from the beginning, both upfront and on bill. Reach codes for renovations, depending on the AC to heat pump or flex path, around 2,200 or 730 metric tons by 2030. AC to heat pump really having no cost differential compared to the AC installation, especially with that rebate. And then the flex path having some upfront costs, but it's kind of coupled with a much bigger project and represents a small overall percentage and will provide long-term on-bill savings. Zero NOx, by far the most greenhouse gas emissions reduction, but potentially high upfront costs in that, especially with the HVAC. Less so with the water heater, but could still be outlier times when you have like a difficult install or electric upgrades that need to happen. Option 4, building performance standards. Probably not very much emissions reduction by 2030 unless they find something really great in that retro commissioning phase, but really giving commercial buildings a flexible path towards decarbonization. Another thing to think about is we'll really have to look at multifamily and equity concerns there. So how do we keep these, if we're giving a multifamily building money to do upgrades or they're getting grants or something like that, we want to keep those costs from getting passed on to renters. So that would have to be a conversation for the performance standards. And then the municipal electric first policy, not a lot of emissions reductions in the scheme of things, but really a great opportunity for leadership by the city. And with that, I will turn it over for any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Ryan and Andrea. So at this point, we're doing public comment first, and then we'll do commission questions and discussion. So I believe the first public comment is actually a 5-minute group presentation. And so will the folks who are doing the group presentation come on up?
I have
And is this the San Mateo Climate Action Team or another group doing the presentation? Wonderful. Welcome.
I have Michelle, Terry, and Zach.
Fabulous. Welcome. So just make sure your mic is on. It should glow red. Yeah, I think there's a button. There we go. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Clerk. Wonderful. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Michelle Hudson. I'm a longtime resident of San Mateo, and I'm a volunteer with 350 Silicon Valley San Mateo Climate Action Team. And I'm presenting along with Terry Whitehair and Zach Scott. I'm going to turn it over to Zach to start.
Good evening. All right, can you hear me? Good evening, members of the Commission. I'm Zach Scott, a 10th grader at Aragon High School and a lifelong San Mateo resident. My home is partially electrified. Thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation today. We are here today to talk about buildings in San Mateo and reducing their greenhouse gas emissions to zero, and to implement the City Council's former priority, establish policies to decarbonize existing buildings and infrastructure, and to eliminate methane gas use by 2030. Next slide, please. So who are we? The San Mateo Climate Action Team works to reduce greenhouse gases at local levels. We are mothers, fathers, seniors, students, and ordinary people working for a better future for ourselves, our children, and grandchildren. We also work together with many other organizations. Next slide, please. Okay. This slide simply illustrates how we are out of time. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, we can only emit greenhouse gases at the current rate for 5 more years before climate change becomes irreversible. It's critical that we act now. Now I'm going to turn it over to Terry Whitehair. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Zach. Well, as you probably know, we've electrified our whole home. And many of us in San Mateo Climate Action Team are active on climate action across the country. San Mateo is admired as a climate leader. But we get to bask in your glory because of what the city staff, SIC, and City Council have done. We ask for your help to take the next step. Next slide, please. So we are here to debate today to support all 5 options, aka pathways, as we talked about, in the decarbonation study. The options include, as we've heard, reach codes for new construction and renovations, zero NOx standards That's the most important pathway. Building performance standards for commercial buildings and electrification of city buildings. Next slide, please. So Peninsula Clean Energy can make these options a reality. They can help residents electrify their homes from do-it-yourself to done for you. We are so lucky to have Peninsula Clean Energy. PCE has everything needed to go electric efficiently and on budget, including personal consultation in your home, full service installation backed by Peninsula Clean Energy, applied rebates and incentives, and this is something new, emergency hot water replacement. And now I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Hudson.
Thanks, Terry. So to meet our climate action plan goals by 2045, we have to stop using gas in our homes for our personal health and for the environment. New construction REACH codes are a good start, but only a small step. We've heard our mayor say at the State of the City, San Mateo has done a lot on climate action, but existing buildings is where the action is now, and we agree. As you can see on this slide, of the 5 options in the decarbonization study, the zero NOx standard has the most impact in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, followed by renovation codes. So we do urge you to support all 5 options, but especially the most impactful ones. Next slide, please. So PCE has been very successful in its rebate program over the last 4 years, so much so that the cost of electric replacements is starting to reach parity with gas replacements, as shown on this slide. And water heaters fail, furnaces fail, so we should be ready to replace with electric appliances. Next slide, please. We also wanted to point out that free electric appliances are available to income qualified homeowners through PCE. Next slide, please. Here are the income guidelines to qualify for this program. As you could see here, a 1-person household must have gross annual household income up to about $109,000 to qualify, and the amount scales up from there depending on household size. Next slide, please. Once again, we urge you to support all 5 options or pathways in the decarbonization study, especially those that are the most impactful. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much. And you were super on time. All right, do we have other public commenters?
Madam Chair, we do. We have 6 in person and 1 online. I will have the online person speak first.
Fabulous. 3 minutes apiece.
Dashiell, I'm going to allow you to talk right now. We actually have 2. I have another hand raised, so that's 7. Dashiell, can you hear?
I can, yes. Thank you. Hello, my name is Dashiell Leeds. I'm the Conservation Coordinator for the Sierra Club Loma Prieta chapter. I'm speaking in support of exploring the equitable implementation of all 5 objectives of the Sustainability Building Strategy. But in particular, I'd like to focus my time on supporting AC to heat pump codes. As discussed earlier, these policies could require the installation of a heat pump when an air conditioner is replaced or installed. The absolute best time for households to switch to a heat pump is when they need to replace or install their air conditioner. Heat pumps can easily replace central AC units without requiring electrical upgrades. Heat pumps come with the added benefit of providing both heating and cooling, negating the necessity to replace a gas furnace down the line. This also allows for San Mateo residents to be well positioned, as discussed earlier, for the implementation of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District appliance rules, phasing out the sale of gas appliances, including furnaces and water heaters. So we hope you encourage the city to continue working on these policies, and we support the acceleration of equitable climate policies for existing buildings. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Lovely to hear from you, Dashiell.
Our next speaker will be Bruce, and after that, Mary Bevins, I will have you line up over here.
Sorry, Madam Chair, do we have, Madam Clerk, do we have 8 or 7?
We have 7, sorry.
7
Yeah.
total. Okay, thank you.
You're on mute. Can you hear me now?
Bruce, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to speak. We should recognize some of the reasons why we're doing this. I mean, we live in a land that was basically settled by indigenous populations and kind of uprooted them. And we really need to make sure that we are good stewards of the land that we have, and that we recognize the people that were predecessors to us, and also recognize the fact that we're leaving this planet for, as we leave and exit our part on this planet. And we need to make sure that the people who follow on from us have the same benefits or better ones than we had. And so it's clear for that. There's been mentioned a couple of times about the 2030 date, about the fact that IPCC said that there's a need to address this, to not have climate change to be permanent. And so, we need to look to that as well. And the objectives are important. You've mentioned the 5 plans for this. I'm not going to do anything to change that. That's a good working list for this. And I appreciate the fact of the opportunity to speak, and the fact that you guys have taken this seriously. And I hope that you continue to do this so that you continue to be a beacon of light in regards to this happening, and tell people how they can manage it. Thanks again.
That concludes the
Thank you,
online.
Bruce.
Madam Chair, I apologize. There are 8. You are correct.
There are 8,
Yes,
right?
yes. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Mary Bevins. I live in San Mateo, and I want to thank the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission for the opportunity to speak and for showing continued climate leadership. I speak to you tonight on behalf of not only myself, my group that I founded, Indivisible San Mateo, but also on behalf of my 5-year-old granddaughter and the hundreds of students I have taught in my 30 years of teaching elementary school. I don't think a day has gone by in those 30 years and during my granddaughter's 5 years on this planet that I have not worried about. She's personal to me, our dear Mother Nature. I call her Mother Nature because I think of her as a living, breathing thing, which she is, and she needs, as all of us do, clean air and clean water, among other things, to survive. So I want to thank the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission for being the leaders to help the City Council to adopt an important objective. Establish policies to decarbonize existing buildings and infrastructure and eliminate methane gas use by 2030. One reason I love San Mateo so much is because we're the leaders in a lot of quality of life issues, and this is a big one. I would like to ask the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission to support the 5 objectives being considered tonight, to keep in place the very successful REACH codes for new construction, to extend REACH codes to retrofits of existing buildings, to support accelerated elimination of nitrous oxides, specifically the air district requirements, to replace failed gas water heaters and failed gas furnaces. And I just got our heat pumps in my duplex just last year, and it's been wonderful. You heard tonight that this is the most impactful objective. To build upon an established program of building performance standards and to support electrification of city buildings. I'm very grateful for your continued leadership on behalf of Mother Nature, of me, of my granddaughter, of my hundreds of students, and of all of us who are worried about global warming and want to do everything we can to stop it before it's too late. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary.
Madam Chair, we received one more, so I'm going to advise that 9 be the last one. And
Okay.
the last speaker will be TJ. Last speaker. Kay, you are next for Kay Eldridge. You are the next one. And then John McKenna, I will have you queued up ready to go for the next one.
Good evening. My name is Carol Eldridge. I am a member of One San Mateo, which is a community group formed in 2017 to pursue increased racial and housing justice in the city of San Mateo. We live in a moment when the reality of climate change at the national level is not only questioned, but denied. This in spite of the fact that the reality makes itself felt with brutal force and shocking regularity. In face of this, I believe we are called upon to do everything possible at the local level to push back against what is a very real and existential threat. electrifying our homes can be a very important way to do this. But not only does it preserve the environment, it also makes our interior living spaces safer and more healthy. I have been particularly interested in the findings on childhood asthma and the fact that the noxious gases are just such a catalyst for asthma. I devote a lot of my time to the challenges of low-income residents in this city. So I was also very interested in the fact that Peninsula Clean Energy will convert homes to electrified appliances at no cost. So I'm here this evening to encourage the city to continue in its leadership on climate change and consider all 5 pathways. And I am also very interested in the city keeping its eye on equity issues, such as the one mentioned, trying to avert negative impacts on renters in the city. So thank you very much.
Next
Thank you,
speaker
Carol.
is John, and then Wendy, I will have you queued up ready to go next.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is John McKenna. I am the father of an 11-year-old daughter, and I'm very concerned about her future. Collectively, we are not acting with the urgency that the climate situation demands and deserves. The science is clear, and it is well documented that the cost of addressing the climate crisis will never be less expensive than it is right now. The longer we wait, the greater the cost and suffering. Time is running out. We must act now to preserve a livable planet for future generations. That being said, I want to thank the City of San Mateo for prioritizing this issue and working to put a plan in place to decarbonize. San Mateo has proven to be a leader. We need that to continue, and we need more cities to follow. I respectfully ask the SIC to please support the boldest and most meaningful versions of the pathways outlined in tonight's presentation. We are in a yes and moment. Following just 1 or 2 of these pathways will not adequately address the challenge we have before us. Each of the 5 pathways offers solutions to different problems, so we essentially need all of them in one form or another to be adopted in order to meet the city's goals. While taking these actions will confront the climate crisis, it's also helpful to highlight the co-benefits these electrification pathways, which include better local air quality, improved public health, increased safety, greater resiliency, more comfortable buildings, and lower energy costs. It's also important to understand that there are excellent resources and financial support mechanisms in place to assist with this transition, particularly for low-income communities. And I just want to address some of the community concerns. The installation costs, yes, but it's important to understand that's the marginal cost of replacing gas with electric. There are incentives available to minimize this gap or eliminate it. And costs will come down as we make more products and economies of scale kick in. The install challenges are real, but it's misunderstood that panel upgrades are needed. Many studies of real-world projects show that panel upgrades are rarely necessary for full electrification with charging. I think the stat tonight was 90 to 95% won't need an upgrade. On-bill costs, studies have shown that the energy costs are less with all-electric homes. The grid, it's getting cleaner, more reliable, and more resilient every day with the introduction of batteries and solar and wind and other clean forms of energy. We are upgrading our buildings and the grid in parallel. And the lack of education is true, but this is an opportunity for the city to educate residents, businesses, and contractors to help make this transition. And then one other thing I want to note, Menlo Spark is a local agency. They have fully electrified an affordable multifamily project in Menlo Park, 6 units without a panel upgrade. They're working on a second in Berkeley. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Next speaker is Wendy, and then Elaine, I will have you queued up, ready to go.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Wendy Cho, and I live and rent in San Mateo. I'm the parent of a 13-year-old as well. I am on staff at Acterra, Action for a Healthy Planet, where I am the Coalition and Project Senior Manager. Actera is a nonprofit organization dedicated to public education and advocacy on sustainability, energy, climate, and environmental issues. Actera joins with many of the individuals and organizations who have spoken tonight in full support of all 5 of San Mateo's proposed pathways to help achieve an equitable transition to fossil-free buildings. I want to specifically address 2 of the pathways that have been discussed tonight. Under renovations, or option 2, the replacement of a defunct AC unit with a heat pump that can both heat and cool the home is a very smart decision that saves money, since one appliance can serve the purpose of 2, the AC or a furnace. In addition, there are energy savings from the very high energy efficiency that heat pumps provide. And there is no incremental cost difference between installing a heat pump versus traditional AC, even before including the benefits from heat pump rebates. And this is well aligned with the upcoming Bay Area Air District regulation, which requires electric space heating starting in 2029. My second comment is regarding option 3. This is a health-based strategy that involves prohibiting the installation of equipment for space and water heating if it produces nitrogen oxides, or NOx. This measure would protect residents' health because research at Stanford and many other places has shown that combustion inside the home produces harmful byproducts that can lead to chronic conditions such as asthma. I wanted to thank the City of San Mateo for initiating this consultant-led decarbonization study and for directing significant city staff time towards this effort. These actions represent tremendous leadership in support of reducing the city's greenhouse gas pollution, improving public health, and achieving lasting change to our city's building stock. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Wendy.
Our next speaker is Elaine, and then Fernando and TJ. I will have you guys line up and get queued for ready.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Elaine Salinger. I'm a retired veterinarian. I live in San Mateo, and I am the leader of the San Mateo County chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. We have almost 1,300 members, and over 200 of them live inside the city of San Mateo. All of our members fully support electrification and using energy efficient appliances. So again, I'm speaking for over 200 people who live inside the city. I also can speak from personal experience. We replaced our gas furnace. We had no air conditioning. We replaced it and our bill went down 70%. So it is definitely very energy efficient. It's quite amazing. I also have experienced that we need laws like this because I'll tell you what happened to us 12 years ago. There was an opportunity to put solar panels on a roof, and no money down, no money up front. You would lease to own it in 8 years. So the bill would, your electric bill would immediately go down because, hey, the energy from the sun is free. And then after 8 years, you would really start saving money. So I thought, oh, this is such a great deal. I'm going to do a next door post to 500 homes in our neighborhood. And boy, people are just going to really jump on this opportunity. Guess how many people actually followed through? 1. Our immediate neighbor, because they knew us, they trusted us, they saw the solar panels going in, they talked to my husband and me, and they're the only ones who followed through. Change is hard for people. It's hard for people to imagine, and it is really important that leaders lead and set up laws to help the transition happen, because we have got to do this. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine.
Our next speaker is Fernando, and then TJ will be our last speaker.
Good evening, Commissioners. Fernando Pena on behalf of the San Mateo County Association of Realtors. I wanted to let you know that SAMCAR meets regularly with Peninsula Clean Energy and the County Office of Sustainability. We've been very impressed by PCE's action and all the programs that they've instituted to date. We're especially impressed with the concierge program. We are encouraging our members to continue to learn more about electrification, advise their clients about the benefits of electrification, and we will continue to do so. While we agree with the need for electrification for homes today and in the future, we continue to oppose mandates from local and state governments and instead seek a voluntary program. The timeline imposed by the Bay Area Air District to manage eliminate gas water heaters and furnaces, we believe is unrealistic. Seniors, people on fixed incomes, people of color, renters, and the middle class may not be able to afford electrification of homes. Concerns about PG&E grid reliability, permitting timeframes, manufacturing, the future of rebates, income qualification for middle class homes, and added electrification costs for homeowners must be taken into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando.
And our final speaker is TJ.
How you guys doing? So what I'm going to say is probably going to seem very controversial, but I'm just trying to look out for the best of our residents here and make sure we're not rushing into anything that doesn't actually make any sense. And I know everyone likes to quote saying that science is in agreement. Well, if we historically look at what science has projected, they've been historically wrong. Right now, we're worried about the ice caps melting. Well, recently, a science article just came out that shows that the ice caps have grown over the past couple years. Puts a big issue in the narrative here. And again, I'm not saying that humans don't have an impact on climate. I definitely think we do, but like maybe not rush into this forceful electrification and like what's the end goal? So for example, like tailpipes, I know we're talking about cars, but exhaust tailpipes are 99% cleaner than 1972. I don't know if we can get much better than that. Like things are a lot cleaner. So let's just make sure we're thinking about that. And also, can we deal with this increased demand on electricity? Peninsula Clean Energy, that company turns a hefty profit. Go look at the financials. And what do they spend the money on? Besides the salaries and paying out everyone that's important, they spend the money on, some will call it education, maybe propaganda. How about they spend the money on the infrastructure, putting our electrical poles in the ground? Let's get the money spent on something like that instead of just this idea that climate change is the end all be all. Yes, the climate changes, but like this whole idea that, you know, it's a guarantee 97% of the science, they absolutely don't. Like that's not true. This is a narrative that is completely cherry picked. Just take the Arctic ice, for example. The Arctic ice has grown over the past couple of years. This is what everyone was worried about melting. Like, hello. I noticed that one of the other commenters mentioned that her bill went down 70%. 70? I'm a little curious. I'd love to know more about that. Also, when you put on solar panels on the houses, PG&E actually forces you to take that energy and put it back onto the grid. They pay you nickel fritz, okay? And then when you need that energy later because you don't have a battery storage, because again, they make you put it back into the grid. Maybe you can get your own battery storage, but again, it's forced to go back into the grid. Then they sell it back to you at an extremely high cost a night. How is that? We're just helping them. How is it helping the residents? Again, PG&E historically, like the books, financial wise, are they really doing what's good for us? I just say like, take a second, think about the costs here. Someone mentioned that we don't want to pass this increased cost onto the tenants. Like, how is that not going to happen? Like what? Like a lot of things just don't make logical sense. Thank you.
Thank you, TJ. All righty. Madam Clerk, does that conclude public comment?
That concludes public comment.
Great. Okay, so now it is time for commission questions and discussion. I cannot see Commissioner Krantz, so I don't know if he has questions and comments, but anyone?
I'll raise my hand at an appropriate spot.
Okay, so you want to take a couple moments, Commissioner Krantz, and someone else on the dais can do their questions and discussion first?
Yeah, sure. When you get a reasonable spot, call on me and I'll be here.
Okay, great. Would someone like to start off with questions and comments? Thank you, Vice Chair.
I'll start.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really helpful seeing all those policies laid out. I just have clarifying questions, sort of all over the place, so I'll try and catch all of mine. But I guess my big question is, we had to repeal our REACH codes because we couldn't supersede federal guidelines for forcing choice of appliances. So can you explain how the requiring heat pumps over furnaces and heat water would not end up in the same space as REACH codes?
Yeah, so for new construction, there's two options. There's the code that you currently have on the books, which is the single margin source energy code, and that avoids EPCA. It avoids superseding EPCA by providing a cost-effective route where you can build with gas still. So that's allowed. Then the other option would be a zero NOx requirement. That was recently litigated, I believe, in New York, and that circuit of courts found that is a reasonable option that doesn't supersede EPCA because you're not affecting any energy efficiency. It's just an air quality, and that goes in the health and safety. So the zero NOx codes would potentially fall under that bucket. And then for the AC to heat pump, you would actually leave a pathway for a normal air conditioner, but there would be additional requirements for energy efficiency that would really increase the cost up front, but be cost effective over time. And it would just make the heat pump more of a, people would choose that because it'd be lower cost essentially.
Okay, yeah.
Upfront.
Thanks for laying that. Yeah, that makes more sense. Thank you. A question about the zero NOx, because it had such great reductions, does that include what the air district would already have starting in when it was implemented? Or like, are we talking about like 2 extra years of those reductions?
Yes. So everything that I talked about today is after the air district reductions and Title 24 reductions. So that it was all additional to those reductions. And mostly where you're getting the reduction is by like 4 years more of HVAC swap outs. You only get about 1 more year of water heaters because that happens pretty soon. But because the HVAC is 2029, that's where we're getting most of those reductions.
Okay. And then, so for the renovations, so when we figure out the cost effectiveness, if we're changing heat pumps for AC requiring, then it's sort of a no-brainer because it costs a lot less than putting an AC system. But if we're through the NOx, if we're forcing it through a furnace, then it's just, if it's that pathway, it feels less cost effective, right? Because
yes,
it's the same result, but less cost effective because of what you're changing out. Is that?
Yeah. So the trigger point is slightly different. And because the AC is already electric,
right,
it's more cost effective to just swap that out because it's like literally the same footprint. It goes in the same place. It's an easy swap. On the gas side, the cost differential is higher because we're assuming that there's a gas furnace inside. There's no wiring there. You're going to have to do that. You have to maybe reconfigure ducts. That all goes into that cost. And that's why you see that higher cost there.
Got it. Okay. I know this is probably the tricky, but can you explain a little bit about enforcement? Because I do know when the air district does its NOx, they'll probably just do, a regional, say at point of sale that you can't do this, but how would a city enforce this?
For the zero NOx requirements?
For the zero NOx, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky. It's going to be through the permitting process, and we likely have fairly low permit compliance. And this could add to that even if it's going to be a high cost. I think, like you're saying, benefit of the air district is that it's going to be happening region wide, and it's going to be really hard. Like, you're going to have to leave the Bay Area to get one of these. You could have that in San Mateo, but if you can just drive to the next city over and get it, it's going to be harder to enforce. Some cities have done, like, I think City of Davis has a time of sale, like, permit inspection, where when you're selling a house, like, someone walks through and says, hey, there's a bunch of stuff here that's done that's not permitted, and you have to fix it at that time. They've been able to get more permit compliance, but it would, yeah, that's like a separate program and discussion.
Just so that we're evaluating it, you know, how it is. So those really high NOx reductions for, greenhouse gas reductions for the NOx option, does that consider really low enforce compliance?
It considers some compliance, some non-compliance, but I think it's like 10 or 15%. And it's probably lower than that.
10 to 15% that people will comply, or
10%, 10 to 15% that people won't comply.
got it. But it'll probably be, yeah, okay. Oh, regarding the benchmarking, which seems really, that was really interesting that you said Brisbane has like 100% or close to compliance. Do those numbers of reductions include the 50,000 square feet that are already under state law?
No, so that was all natural gas emissions from commercial addresses. We don't know how much is from which buildings.
Got it.
So we just, that's like the total that you could get. What we would actually get in the short term is a smaller portion of that, but I don't know. We don't have any more granular data until you start doing the reporting. And then you'd have a much better idea of like exactly how much you are capturing. And over time, you could phase in smaller buildings. So you could start at 50,000 and then go to like 40, 30, 20. But we did some building segmentation analysis of different square footages of buildings up to 20,000 square feet, I think. And you can capture a pretty significant square footage of commercial buildings at that 50,000 mark. And it keeps the overall number of buildings low. I think there's around like 100 or so, which is like a reasonable starting place for staffing can be challenging for building performance standard. And the way Brisbane is able to get that number is that they know all those building owners through this process, and they call them and bug them if they don't submit. And it just takes some time. So starting with like a reasonable number of buildings and then lowering that threshold over time is a good way to go.
Do you know if the state is going to increase, capture more? They're at 50,000. Will they eventually want, the 25,000 square feet and so on?
I don't know if they're going to be lowering their threshold. I know that they're currently working on like requirements to go with their benchmarking. And that could be rolling out in the next couple of years. But that's like the next step for them, is saying they've been benchmarking for a while, and soon they'll start saying, okay, you actually have to start complying with some reductions. Yeah.
It was interesting that you said the building owners or commercial developers that came were actually supportive of this. Do they see basically cost savings down the line from
I think
measure?
It could be the folks we talk to have newer buildings and they're just not worried that they're going to have to do very much. It could be that they see savings. There are a lot of these programs around the country and throughout the state with some decent data on like where cost effectiveness or cost savings come from. And part of it is actual on-bill savings, but then there's also benefits of just having like a better building. And if you're renting your building out, you can sometimes get better rents or higher occupancy rates because you've got a more efficient, healthier, better air quality, more new appliances, stuff like that.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And then I think just one last question about the municipal electric first. It seems from the next report, Andrea will show, that the city is already on that path. Would this be something more of just to show leadership and as an example versus a necessity? I mean, which is equally important.
Yeah, I think a policy would firmly establish direction at the council level or at the executive level on assessing electric replacements first. But yeah, you're right. The city has made improvements and taken advantage of programs, but this would set firm policy direction.
Great. Okay, well, that's all my questions for now, but I reserve the opportunity to speak again.
Absolutely. Great. Okay. Any other questions or comments for right now? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Rinsky.
You know, some of my questions are also going to be prefaced on the fact that I spent several hours speaking with residents one-on-one. And that gives you 20 minutes of time to understand their lives and the impact of this policy. And I fortuitously ran into Robert at Kinko's today and used some of his literature to share with the residents I spoke with today. So I've spoken with residents over the last several days in District 2, 4, and 5. So some of my questions are going to be based on that. And comments too. So, before I get to that, I just want to go back into the packet and some of the letters that were sent by some of the residents. Mr. Williams, Andrea, sent a letter at the end of February, and he says, please take into consideration the cost of modifying small existing structures. Does anybody have a sense what he is concerned about?
Yeah, I think that because the form factor of a heat pump water heater or HVAC is a little bit different. They can be bigger or taller than what's there.
When you say form factor, you're just saying the physical,
the
physical volume, right?
dimensions.
Yeah, the dimensions, right?
So like a great example is I did my water heater. The current one I had was like a short, stubby gas water heater. We replaced it with a heat pump water heater. The condensing unit is on top of the water heater,
Right,
so it's taller. And I was like just barely able to fit it in my garage. We had lots of room this way, but like less room this way. If our ceiling had been lower, then we would have had to find a different place to put that water heater.
Right.
So you could be in a situation in some buildings where you've got a water heater in a closet where there's not enough air volume, or there's like walls are too close, and you might have to make some modifications. That's going to add to the cost.
Yeah.
What I will say is the data that we are using, which is thousands of data points from the tech rebate program, includes at least some of those projects that require those changes. So it's not like we don't account for that at all. It is an average, so stuff gets averaged out, and it is a rebate program. So it could be that folks with a lot of big changes just didn't do the program, so they're not in there. But it could also be that people who are doing the rebate program, or especially early on, contractors were charging a bit more. So it's hard to know, but at the end of the day, there's
Right, but
thousands
anyway,
of
there
data
could be
points.
significant costs if I have to retrofit my apartment or my garage. A lot of these could sit in the garage. The water heater, I'm thinking, sits in the garage. The furnace could be in the attic. It could be under the ground. It could be outside. Yeah. So, but anyway, so that's what we think he's going in, and we need to consider that. And I might have an idea about how the city could play a role in helping to offset that cost.
And I would say that we talked about a large variety of different ordinances and types of policies today. Some of the benefits, like the AC to heat pump requirement, is that the form factor is the same, and it goes exactly where your normal AC would go.
Sure,
So
and I'll
this
have
is
some questions
specific to
on that as
potential
well.
things.
So when we get to that option, but I just want to go through some of the residents' questions here. So Mr. Martins, Christine, I understand you had a chance to speak with him. In his letter, he expressed main issues with PG&E and the city of San Mateo also contributed to delays. and once again, what PG&E does, I don't think we have any control over. And I have heard in my 17 interviews, I have heard about PG&E, people who want to put solar panels in and it's slow. But what we can control, particularly as we start to tee this up, is what the city can improve on. And that's fair. This is also new to us too. It's not a slight on anyone. We just have to recognize it and figure out what the problems are and just continually improve it. But did Mr. Martins, he says it here in his letter, did he say anything about in your discussion with him about the city, specifically more the city than PG&E?
He did. So what he explained to me is that he apparently, so it sounded like he pulled his permit some time ago. And what he explained to me is that he came in on a day when our permit center was closed. And so he was unable to obtain assistance in person on the day that he came in. And he was under the impression that we were closed due to the pandemic. So I think he was in for his permitting quite some time ago.
Right.
Because as you may be aware, we were only closed due to pandemic conditions for a few months in time.
Right.
And so we do close on Tuesday afternoons for staff meetings, and that's been in place for a decade or more. And so I think he had the bad luck to come into the permit center on a day when staff wasn't available. The other thing that he mentioned is that his plans were reviewed by an outside plan checker, and we do use outside plan check
Right, they do.
services for some of our permitting when we have an increase in volume. And so he was disappointed that his plans were checked by someone who was not a member of our permanent staff. And so those were two aspects of his permitting that contributed to his frustration, but he did express that I think his primary point of frustration was PG&E. He required several inspections by PG&E. He had a transformer on his site.
Oh, he had
So he has a
transformer.
property that has an on-site transformer, and his understanding was that would make his permitting easier. And it didn't do anything to contribute to the ease.
Yeah, that would
He had a very difficult
complicate.
time
Yes,
working
that
with
would
PG&E.
complicate it. And that's fine. I mean, like I said, this is not a slight on anyone. It's just trying to understand what he is relaying and if there's anything that we need to be improved on. And frankly, based on the 2 points you've just said, we're closed anyway. It's been like that for years. And unless that changes, and then going back to, we use outside checkers. Actually, many cities use outside checkers. So I don't think that that's unusual.
Yeah, and I think maybe that there was a little bit of a communication issue with our closure. And so I did circle back with our staff, and we did talk about that and communicating with our customers about our closures and how we can be a little more effective at that. So
Right.
we did use his feedback to have a constructive conversation internally.
Sure. Okay, super. Thank you. Let me see. Some other questions here. Option one, I just want to make sure I understand them. Option one is, well, let me back up. The city, in fact, the 9 Bay Area counties, of which includes San Mateo County, we've got the January 2027 date, and we have the January 2029 date. And so our city, as well as all other cities in the 9 Bay Area counties, have to abide. That is our regulatory jurisdiction, unless something changes it, the courts or something happens. But for
Correct.
now, those are the big dates.
Correct.
Right, okay. And so and I just want to make sure everybody understands those are 2 very important dates there. So option one is maintaining how we are, and then when the January 2027 and the January 2029 dates are, then we switch over with the rest. We basically abide to the Bay Area Air Quality District, or however they name themselves.
Yeah,
Okay.
business as usual is maintaining strong leadership in efforts on new construction.
Right.
And a focus on outreach and engagement to support that transition.
And I would, you'll see in my comments, I'm going to talk a little bit about, because I spoke to a lot of people about outreach, and I'll share with you my findings on that. Okay, option 2, renovation. I learned a lot about this. In speaking with not only contractors, but the 17 people I spoke with for 15, 20 minutes over the last few weeks, some of them today, and that's where I ran into Robert and Kinko's. So on the renovation, is that a new or is that a replacement system-wide? And when I say system-wide, it's through the entire building. It's not a unit that goes into the wall or into the window. When you look at AC, you're talking the whole house, the whole building. Central, I think central air is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, these would be for newly installed, whether it's a new building or a.
Right, but it's newly installed, not, yes, okay. And it's a central newly installed AC system.
Central AC, yeah.
Central AC, thank you, newly installed. And putting in at that point a two-way heat pump. Okay. What happens, and once again, so it's newly installed. If it's a replacement, let's say I currently have central air, and I do this before the January, the 2027, 2029 date, could I do central air there, or could I do a two-way heat pump?
So if the city adopted the two-way AC requirement, as soon as that was adopted, then any installation.
Okay, so
of a
new
central
or
air conditioner-
replacements.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Because here's where, in terms of speaking with contractors, and I read in the report, it says this is pretty much, I'm going to call it a no-brainer retrofit. And let's talk about replacements. Did you talk to any contractors about that? I did.
Yeah.
Okay, and both of, and these are people here in the city of San Mateo, said to me, no, it's not that straightforward. It's not that clean. I'm not so much worried about the new AC system. It's the replacement AC system. And as one said, it's not like you just drop a high-end motor into a mid-sized car and expect the brakes and the speedometer and gas to work and the wheels, that whole bit. So I'm having trouble making sure, I'm having trouble understanding if that is cost effective.
So
the new, I get it. That to me is, but
Makes sense,
the
yeah.
replacement,
Yes.
I don't, yeah.
So specifically on the replacement piece, both PCE and the state of California. So in the new building code,
Right.
as part of the Cal Green Code, there's going to be a two-way AC option. So the state has been studying this and speaking with contractors across the state, pulling data from projects across the state, like, thousands of data points. And their findings are it's essentially the same cost up to over the 30-year lifespan. They find a savings, but the upfront costs within, $1,500 of each other. And it really is just the cost of a upgraded piece of equipment. The ducting, everything should operate the same because it's still just an air conditioner. It could be that the folks you talk to are not experienced with heat
Oh,
pumps.
no, they're very experienced. Yeah.
Well, they could be experienced with HVACs, but they may not have experience with the heat pump technology. I don't know. It's, again, been studied both by local folks at PCE and they have data on this as well. And that's where they came up with their $1,500 rebate based on that cost differential. And then the state has studied it on a statewide basis and found essentially the same number. So that's what we're basing
Yeah.
our data off
I mean,
of.
I just, no, these people are very experienced. So, and they said it can be done, but it's not such a straightforward. In fact, I showed them the report, the packet here, and they said, no, it's not that straightforward.
And I think
devils are in the details. Anyway, that's just a question I have. Yeah, Andrea.
I was going to respond that I think you're making an important part, that continued engagement of HVAC experts and contractors is essential to this transition. And so that engagement has been done by PC and the Air District to an extent, but that would need to continue if the city were to adopt this locally.
Sure. And I would encourage the city to engage with the contractors.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I think that would be very useful and contractors that are in our city that know how to do this work. Also on the renovation, let me ask you this. How did you come up with the $75,000 limit?
Absolutely just a example number.
All right. Can I share something with you that I learned over speaking with people and you get to know their lives? Here's what I don't want to have happen is I'm a family and all of a sudden my parents have to move in with me or my kids have to move back in or my kid's family has to move back in. And I need to quickly put together 2 bedrooms and a bath to accommodate this. So, so I am concerned that under the current, I have no problem if there's a renovation to a kitchen, a living room, a dining room, a den. But if I've got to do I got to put together 2 bedrooms and a bath, 1 bedroom and a bath, because I got people suddenly moving back into my house. My concern is that this will add costs that I don't think is fair. I don't think it's fair. So you'll hear me in the comments talk about that. I'm fine with the renovation. Once again, playrooms, dens, offices, but bedrooms and baths, I'm struggling with that based on what I have heard. And it makes sense to me.
That's valuable feedback. Again, the $75,000 threshold is an example. I think when delving deeper into the policy, we will consider projects and scenarios like that. There are cities that have set minimum square footage thresholds as a example to start to impact projects. So what's built into this is flexibility in how we approach this.
Right. So, I'm going to suggest, at least at this point, since we're still talking conceptual, that bedrooms and baths be exempted because that's living space. I'm probably going to build that because I've got people moving back. And I think we need to accommodate that some way. I don't want to have people penalized and not be able to do this because now they have to pick up extra costs. And some of these extra costs here, because they would have to do some of the building upgrades, right? Would that be?
So they would have a list of things that they could do.
Right.
There's probably 10 or 15 cost-effective ways that they could go, and they would just select the one that they want to do.
Right. So it's one out of the 15 or so.
Yeah, and what some cities have done is say put one for $75,000 or $100,000 or 2 for like $300,000. So if you're going to do like a major gut of your house,
I'm not talking major
stuff.
guts of house.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about people who have emergency situations and people moving back and stuff going up quick.
I think that makes total sense,
Yeah.
and we can adjust those things.
Just think about it as we're starting to finalize this policy. I think it's well warranted. And it's something I did hear in speaking with folks. Option 3, I heard, Christina, do you have something?
If I may just
Sure,
make a
please.
suggestion for consideration, if you wanted to fold something into your recommendation, and if you should decide to recommend a policy that does move forward with an ordinance, what you could consider would be to have an exemption for hardships.
And you can.
And so
exactly.
that's something that we could consider. And
Exactly.
usually that is something that is very common with things like this. And we would have hardship criteria that the council could consider. different kinds of circumstances can warrant it. And so there would be a threshold that would be for the general population who would be subject to an ordinance such as this. And then there would be an out that could be considered when circumstances would warrant an exemption.
And that would be fine. I just want to make sure that people run into hardship situations and we cannot add any more, even if it's a minor cost. I'm looking at some here, water heater package of $230. But thank you. And I think that would be a way to look into that and figure out what that language would be. Option 3, that is acceleration from the 2027 to 2029. I saw the results from the public and it being not popular. By the way, my results, my speaking with the 17 people echoes that. That was not a non-starter. And I don't think I have any other questions at this point on the commercial building and the municipal building. And I'll save my comments on comments. I'll summarize, particularly, and I want to thank Robert for this information on the income, because I use this in my conversations with people today, not when I was doing my interviews or speaking with people.
Do you have any other questions?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, great. Commissioner Robbins or Commissioner Krantz, any questions? Do you want to go?
I got.
Okay.
I'm going to attempt as best as I can. First of all, thank you for
Fabulous.
Thanks for the accommodation today. And I had a very, very productive conversation with Andrea today about some of these concepts. And again, I don't know too much about this, but let me try and help out. So with the conversation we had earlier about add-on AC, this is something we may not have considered. A pre-existing a pre-existing heating unit typically cannot accommodate a new air conditioning unit to be slid in under it. So in other words, the evaporator and the plumbing that goes along with that. So if you're going to be adding air conditioning to your house, you're going to have to rip out your existing heating system anyway. You'd also, in the old days, have to put on the side of the house a compressor and a condenser unit. You don't need that anymore. So as far as trying to make this a sales point, to use a word, there's a value add, because instead of having to have an external compressor and a condensing unit, evaporating foil, you eliminate all that with simply a bunch of reversible valves. The refrigerant just goes in a different direction. And I think if I'm reading this correctly, that is your cost savings right there. You're getting an air conditioning for free, so to speak, along with your heating system, but you'd have to put the reversible valve package in, which is nominal. It's not a lot of money. So hopefully that answers some of the questions. Quick question. On page 15, we talked about, in the package, we talked about grid failure. I was wondering, Zach, if you would want to be willing to modify that a little bit. Yeah, we haven't had a total meltdown of the entire Northern California grid. However, many of us have experienced our own local grid failures where a transformer fails or something at a substation fails. I mean, San Mateo recently had one, 4 months ago, where many of us were without electricity for 2-3 days. So it's nice to know that Ukiah and Novato had plenty of power, but in my little world, yeah, we didn't have power for a couple of days. So that adds to the mix of when you're going to roll out electricity. A lot of the already pre-existing infrastructure is old. Transformers, the wires, the substations. And I just want to be accurate and not mislead the public that, oh, the grid's fine. Well, I'm not going to colorize this. I'm going to leave this up to you. My recommendation is that we revisit page 15. I'm going to try and go quickly through this. Compare and contrast. And I know this is possibly, if you're talking to Andrea, this might not be your wheelhouse, but electric water heaters versus, say, a diesel bus that the city owns, how many years would a water heater have to run to equivalent one day of a city truck or a bus running? And I'm guessing this is not part of your bailiwick. But again, if you want to do an overarching big picture, blue skies, we really need to include that to make it a really good plan. I think otherwise we're kind of kind of missing the boat. Additionally, we want to be clear with our constituents that by doing all this inside the city of San Mateo, we're not going to really experience any quality of life. The air's not going to smell better. We get our weather 4 days later from Asia, which is a lot of the particulate, a lot of that stuff. So we really have to be careful about educating our constituents that we don't set them up for miscommunication that this is going to fix global warming. The sad thing is the entire Earth, the entire world has to do this, and we can't. But we can think globally and act locally, and I really applaud you guys for doing that. Let's go to a question. With the federal government removing and retracting a lot of the federal grants and programs, where does San Mateo stand with this, and is it on our radar? Are we keeping up with this, either Zach or Andrea?
Is the question, how are we dealing with the uncertainty at the federal level?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So we've responded to that by removing a fair number of incentives that were available from our analysis, because it's unclear when they're actually going to land or if they are going to land. The one tax credit that we are leaving in the analysis that we talked about tonight, we're leaving it in because it's a law and it's in the tax code. So it's harder for the administration to just remove it at this point. I'm sure they could if they wanted to, but they haven't yet, and it is in the tax code. So for now, we're leaving that in. On the bright side, with Peninsula Clean Energy, they have really been prioritizing this and provide really nice incentives that are super helpful that not all regions get. So between the state benefits, which come in and out, like tech rebates are one that come online and then they get subscribed to in a matter of weeks and then they're gone. We didn't include those either. So really what you see here are like the ones that we feel confident that everyone or mostly everyone should be able to get.
Okay. So here's a question. You costed out the water heater, electrical cost, installation, cost of acquisition. And I can understand some of your price pointing on the on the west side of 101, but in Shoreview and some of the other neighborhoods that I've talked to the people, trying to get a feel for them. So what's it like for you? A lot of them have 80 amp service, which is unless magic is going to happen, that's not enough. You'd need at least 125. In a perfect world, 200 amp service. And what that would require is because and I don't want to go over anybody's, the little concrete box between the driveways, you might know it as a Christie box. That's where the electrical junction is. To bring new wires for increased service over to the service entrance probably is going to require ripping up the driveway. So now you got the cost of acquisition, you got the cost of labor to put the new panel in. Now you also have the cost to rip up driveways and put a new driveway in. And I think for a lot of people on the east side, it's cost prohibitive. It's really going to be a reach for a lot of them to do that. So I just wanted to point that out to you. I'm sure you're probably aware of it, but it's just not everybody in San Mateo is equal. And I want to make sure that we're considering and being considerate, much like Commissioner Warinsky pointed out. I hesitate to use the word hardship cases, but for people that are not as financially secure as other people, that this might be something that's not doable. Lastly, have we ever investigated an additional option that says all these requirements might come to bear when the house gets sold? I know we're doing a lot of this with the sewer. We want to make sure our sewer mains, sewer laterals are intact, and that the sale of a house triggers a camera inspection. would we consider doing that as one of the 5 options, rolling that in there? And I'm done with questions. Thank you.
I can respond to that last piece that there is a local example. The city of Berkeley does have a point of sale requirements associated with more. This is recent, right? Their recent program has expanded to require electrification requirements at the point of sale. The policy pathways that are before you this evening, as Ryan mentioned, are triggered when someone is already pursuing a type of project. So new construction, you're doing a new build, that's when requirements get folded in. And again, with like renovations or even the more aggressive zero NOx standards ahead of the air district schedule, those are triggered when a person is deciding to replace equipment. So they're not being imposed on community members or property owners who are not opting to take action. The commercial building performance standards, that is structured a bit differently.
And as it turns out, I do have one last really quick question. So it's for Ryan. So with respect to NOx, are we concerned about the formation of nitrous oxides or the destruction of the liquefied liquid state nitrogen? And I know it's a technical question, but I grew up in the 70s, and with cars, there was problems with pollution, and NOx was a huge problem. And they reduced the compression ratios. They also had a little pump that squirted oxygen air, ambient air, into the exhaust system to reduce that temperature so we wouldn't cross the threshold to get into the destruction of the NOx. Is that what we're talking about here?
So the focus is really on the combustion of the gas, which creates a gaseous nitric oxide, which is a precursor to a bunch of other kind of nasties in air pollution that can cause smog and ozone and other stuff like that down the line as it reacts with things, and then also is like a human health impact. So that's what's being regulated, and the Air District has been lowering their nitric oxide threshold through a variety of different levels over time. We're already at like a very ultra low NOx standard where basically you might have noticed if you ever try to like buy an appliance on like Home Depot's website, like some things are not available in your area. It's because of these like requirements. And the reason the Air District can do this and cities can do this is because we're oftentimes in non-attainment for federal air quality standards and state air quality standards. So that's where this is kind of based off of, is trying to get within attainment for those criteria pollutants.
Right. It's actually all of California now. You can't buy a gas weed whacker, generator, anything that runs on a gas engine. Even I'm sure it might even roll into small size motorcycles. You can't buy them. So okay, I think that answers it. Just for the record, NOx, as I recall, NOx gets produced at about 98 degrees. So it's a really, really low threshold to produce NOx. But as you pointed out earlier, the scary stuff, the stuff that produces smog, that's at about 2,800 degrees. And that's inside of an engine, easy. Inside of a water heater, probably not. But that's for a different discussion. Hey, thank you, everybody, for all your smarts. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Robbins?
Yeah, thank you. I want to thank both Ryan and Andrea. It was a great presentation, and actually the packet was fantastic. And compared to some of the recent packets we've had on 5G appeals, it was short relatively, but very detailed. So it's great. Also want to thank, it's a shame the audience is mostly gone, but I would like to get in the record, thank everybody from all perspectives who spoke, and a particular shout out to Zach Scott, who I will admit I've known that family for years, and we don't get enough high school students coming in here to speak, particularly on things that are not high school related directly. So I thought that was great. No questions at all, and I'll even go on and say that I think I don't suspect that you really want us down in the weeds too much. I think you want feedback that none of that hurts, but it does take some time on sort of big picture items and, which of these paths make the most sense. That was my read anyway. And the way I've looked at it, and I've gone through this, particularly with Andrea over the years as we've done it, I see sort of three principles that I reflect on that often work together, but often are somewhat at odds. One is the public good, reducing greenhouse gases, health, environment, on and on and on. Another one is choice. I'm not a huge fan of hard mandates. I think if you can do something in a way that gives somebody choice, or at least even the appearance of choice, that can really help. And then third is equity, fairness for people up and down the income scale. And that leads me to be a considerable fan of option 2, pathway 2, because yes, down deep it's a mandate, but it's voluntary, and to the extent that you're choosing to remodel, it may be because the life of something has gone on, but a renovation, and that's a good time to sort of impose this change, as opposed to somebody who's just sitting tight on a fixed income and doesn't have a position. And 4 and 5, I think, are easy pathways, other than the cost on 5. But I think if the city is willing to do that, I would support that totally. And 4, if the feedback from the commercial sector is what it is, and there we get into all the market forces. I was chair of our general plan subcommittee, and the nightmare, the fire hydrant surrounded by dogs in that issue was, but housing is huge. And this does add a cost, and whether it's residential or commercial. But I'd still support that. I think it can be done wisely. The one thing that wasn't talked about a lot in here, it's hinted at occasionally, was the importance of incentives, rebates, and one that doesn't get talked about as much, which are loans. PCE did I don't know if they still have it, the 10-year interest-free loan, and you pay it for 5 years, up to $10,000 for your heat pump, HVAC. And my family, we've gone through all that. For what it's worth, we have solar, we have an EV, had to upgrade the panel on our ancient house, 100-year-old house, and we have put in the heat pump, and that loan was just, talk about your no-brainer. But a lot of this is, the demographic in our city does skew towards high end of homeowners, but when you add in the renters, it's far less so, and particularly for the next generation trying to come in. So if there is some way, and it's something I'll talk to council members about it at the right time, some way where we can allocate some more city funds, like we have done in very small scale ways, but to provide incentives, and loans are interest-free loans are still a pretty cost-effective way to do it, relatively low cost compared to just a grant. And it really, you can see how that would be something that a small multi-unit building owner is likely to do and not have to pass on so much to the renters. So that's it. Those are my thoughts. Thank you all very much.
I'll just add in quickly if I could respond. I think that's a great point. PCE does have that 0% loan. PG&E also has some commercial programs that are pretty good, with on-bill financing for commercial programs. So some of that is out there. And I was just on a call with PCE the other day, and one of their big initiatives moving forward is really trying to figure out the financing piece, especially since we're seeing so much on-bill savings. If we can just finance those upfront costs away, you can kind of you can be saving money like you do with solar on day one. So getting that figured out, I think, is front of mind for several folks.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the city could play a role there. I mean, I happen to think that's an appropriate use of taxpayer funds, even in a time of tight budgetary needs. Thanks.
Great, thank you. My turn. So this topic is deeply close to my professional and personal heart. For those who don't know, I spent 9 years working on building electrification and efficiency policies at the local level. So a lot of the cities that were quoted in the various materials, I personally had a hand in working on behind the scenes. And so you got the ringer, which means I'm going to ask some pretty pointed questions as well with that experience. But knowing that I'm deeply passionate about this topic. Just an opening comment to clarify, I think when it comes to gas use in homes, there's been a lot of recent research that I have found to be really interesting, coming from my alma mater, Stanford, especially. And even in the last 7 days, there was a recent report that just came out from Stanford saying that gas stoves in homes are responsible for a disproportionate amount of childhood cancer versus adults. So children cancer risks from gas stoves are nearly double that of adults. That is a 7-day-old study. And so working on this issue, yes, it's absolutely important for climate change. Yes, the city of San Mateo will not save the world single-handedly, but yes, we can actually literally save people's lives by looking at gas in buildings because we didn't know about it before. This is brand new research, and we have the opportunity to take that research and that knowledge and apply it, just like how people had to do for lead in paint, just like how people had to do for asbestos. So I think of it more as a hazard, as in addition, as a health hazard, in addition to the climate hazard that gas poses. So those are my opening comments. Now getting to the nitty-gritty questions. Okay, so you mentioned that the PCE concierge support, that there's an expectation to expand this. Does the city pay into that to make sure to like help it run, or do we know that we would be at scale effectively enough so that the people of San Mateo would get the right amount of support it needs, or how do you ensure that that would happen?
The city does not pay for the concierge service, but we do have a council member who sits on the board, and that helps establish direction, right, for the organization.
Okay, great. And so there is like more of a handshake agreement that should anything pass within the city of San Mateo, PCE would be ready and equipped and ready to scale to provide the wraparound services.
There's communicative coordination between ourselves at staff level and also with their leadership team on how cities are moving on policies towards electrification.
Okay, great. And then so for option 3, I wanted to better understand right now the proposal is, that 2027, 2029, and instead the proposal is to start replacement rate at in 2026, right? So that is like in 7 months, essentially. One would basically, if the option 3 were to pass, it would basically be starting in 7 months time, anytime something breaks, a water or space heater, one would have to use an electrified widget, correct?
I would just caveat that that's just the example. So you could pick any years, like after 2027 for water heaters, you have to, right? Because it's the Bachmann requirement, but you could move up HVACs a year or 2 years, do nothing with water heaters. You could do water heaters today and no HVAC. That's an example of a policy.
Why in the example for the GHG calculation for option 3, did you guys have larger commercial appliances only complying 1 year in advance at 2028?
Because there's the Bay Area Air District requirements for large water heaters and boilers essentially is 2031.
Okay, so that's moved up 3 years essentially.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And is there any sort of legal advantage to potentially memorializing at the local level the Bay Area district standards as they stand right now in the face of the litigation that the South Coast Air Quality Management District is facing, and that could impact, the results of, the legality of our regional legislation?
So the South Coast District's lawsuit, I think, is settling out of court. So
Oh, is
that
it?
I
Okay, because I
believe
thought they were
so.
like still arguing, they were arguing, submitting their,
I'm fairly certain
okay.
that they're settling out of
Okay.
court. So that should all move forward.
And but that would not be, like, if there's no legal ruling, that doesn't impact
Exactly.
the Bay Area one.
Correct. And their mechanisms are slightly different. I'm not a lawyer, and so I'm not going to give you legal advice. But I think if you memorialize that approach and the Air District was sued and lost, then your approach would probably also be invalid. I think what would be helpful, like if you did adopt the Air District's thresholds yourselves, and the Air District just decides not to move forward from political pressure or anything else, then you would still have your requirement. But I think if it was like a legal challenge that they lost, it would impact the overall zero NOx approach generally.
Oh, I see. In general, so it doesn't matter regionally versus local city ordinance and
Likely
in your
not.
gut.
Yeah.
Okay, as a gut assessment. Okay, great. So going to option 4, this is my bread and butter. So on commercial buildings. So I had a question on why do retro commissioning phase? Why not just skip straight from benchmarking straight to a performance standard? Why do you need the retro commissioning?
So our read is that oftentimes buildings, commercial buildings especially, and older commercial buildings that would likely be covered under the threshold, it's much harder to build a commercial building that operates like with the perfect size equipment and is perfectly efficient and can also like respond to all the things you want it to do as far as like heating and cooling load. So generally what they did was they just oversized everything. So they're like, okay, like here's a boiler, make it 30% bigger just in case. So a lot of stuff operates inefficiently. That retro commissioning phase does 2 things. One gives the building owner a list of things that they can do. If you're just like, hey, get below this threshold and you're a small commercial, you own one 50,000 square foot building, you may have no idea what you're supposed to do. But if you have this list from an engineer that's like, do X, Y, and Z, and you'll get these benefits, it makes it really easy to just move to that next step. The other benefit is an engineer comes in. A lot of times when buildings are built, they start operating. No one ever checks on those systems. So they're just operating very inefficiently. It could be that by having that retro commissioning step done, you just are under the threshold already, just from having that efficiency adjustment. So that's kind of the idea, is to give actionable data to building owners so that they can smoothly move forward and it's not such a jarring or challenging experience.
And so for the buildings that are at 50,000 square feet, which already comply with, which we assume have already complied with California's benchmarking policy for a few years now at least, why not start them on year 1 with retro commissioning? Why give them 1 to 2 years of just benchmarking? Because that's just business as usual, and we need the emissions reductions now.
That's a great point. That is definitely an option. I think the concern is that not all buildings who should be reporting have been. The state, there's a lot of 50,000 square foot buildings in the state of California and not that many state staff to enforce this program. So it could be that the data is just not there.
How many do we have in our city?
It was a few hundred.
I think so. And I'll add like a delay in, or a phased approach allows the city to build the local program and the connections with the building owners, because you're then having to set up your own system, our local system, for compliance.
Yeah, and compliance, like you mentioned, is labor intensive. So who's going to run it?
Yeah, so this is a program that hasn't been resourced. It'd be a new program that would have to be staffed, and all of that would need to be thought through.
So it's more like it's more like everyone get ready stage, because the city also needs to get ready as well. And then you want to also make sure that the couple hundred buildings I'm hearing in the city are already benchmarking.
Correct. Like those first few years could ensure compliance and with the state law.
Okay. And then all of that benchmarking is reliant on Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is an EPA tool. The EPA's budget has been severely slashed. So what assurances do we have that we'll even be able to use that wonderful free tool across all 30-something cities out there with these wonderful, ambitious building policies?
No assurance at all. I think there's probably a pretty good chance that portfolio manager goes down at some point. It's a great tool, but it's not a requirement, right? Like we can build something locally that's fairly simple that allows them to do that reporting. I don't think that is a deal breaker. It's another like unfortunate thing that we have to deal with that would be easier if we had any federal support, but we don't. So there's a workaround.
Okay. And then when you talked about the building performance standard piece, right? It's usually something like a 20% reduction or something, right? And giving them lots of time to know that they're going to come up and they're going to have to achieve this reduction. Have you guys discussed ratcheting that down, in the out years? Or because you mentioned in your talking points, like this is like a one-time thing later, but it's actually like it can be ratcheted over and over and over again, correct?
Yeah.
In the policy design.
So like one idea we floated as an example is you could just set the average as the threshold, and as people get better, the average will drop with it. So it would just be like a constantly moving target, and new buildings would fall below it and then get above it, and then it would drop down. So you could do something like that. We also heard feedback in our focus group that said, hey, can you, instead of making me compete against other buildings, like I have a 100-year-old building, how can I compete against a 2-year-old building? Can I just improve off of my own score on an annual basis? So you could do something like that as well. I think you can say on the flip side, like, hey, you've been generating capital with your building for 100 years, so you probably could make some investments in it at this point. But it would just come down to like however you want to set those thresholds and move them over time. But the idea is that eventually you would get to zero and you would have a city full of carbon-free buildings.
Yeah. And in terms of the square footage threshold, we talked about 50,000 because that's what the state of California does. But is there also conversation about dropping it down? Some cities have gone down to 25,000, for instance.
As you drop the square footage, you collect more buildings, but your ratio of like building to square footage gets worse. So you're increasing staff time, but you kind of get diminishing returns. So yes, you'd probably want to decrease that over time, but it would depend on staffing and how much resources you want to put towards the project, how things are going, how much hand-holding folks are needing. And at some point, like you wouldn't want to get so small that the effort that you're putting in is just like not there. And the other thing is, as you get to smaller buildings, they're usually just using the same equipment that like residential buildings are using. Like a small office probably just has a 60-gallon water heater. So there might be better ways to address those buildings besides a building performance standard.
Great. And then for option 5 on municipal action, I caught that we don't have an inventory because you quoted 2005 data. So Andrea, if this option were to go forward, would we do a GHG inventory for our municipal buildings?
I think that's good feedback. We have outdated municipal information. Fortunately, more updated community-wide greenhouse gas emissions inventory. But I think that's noted.
And then I also was curious in the conversations with the public or any of the feedback or policy design, has there been any discussions? I take to heart the idea of choice. I take to heart the idea of freedom. And at the same time, I also take to the heart, well, pay for it. And so if folks wanted to use gas or continue to use gas, were there any conversations or considerations about having folks pay somehow for that because they are depleting the public good in a way to enjoy their gas appliances and then using those fees or whatnot to offset that in some other fashion, for instance, with low income, buildings or something like that who are more hardship constrained.
So we didn't have a discussion about that specific structure to have some sort of fee if you want to continue your natural gas use. However, if you look at the policy pathways, you'll see that there's flexibility in each of them. And so none of these outright prohibit natural gas equipment or natural gas infrastructure, because as we've discussed at previous meetings, and even in this meeting, Like we cannot have local ordinances that do so.
Not
And-
prohibit, but they can pay for it.
Right.
They can be paid for.
I think the policy pathways at this point present options so that a property owner can pursue both pathways with cost-effective options. I think Ryan did talk about specifically for the AC to heat pump measure that you can pursue a traditional air conditioning. The efficiency measures do cost more upfront. So that's how things have
Right,
been
that costs
structured.
upfront, like, you know, in terms of like the price that one would pay to like Home Depot or something. But I'm talking about for the public good.
There's the city of Ashland, Oregon is maybe what you're referencing. They have a program where if you want to get a permit for a gas appliance, there's a climate fee associated with that. So instead of, you know, maybe for installing a electric water heater, you're going to spend $200 on a permit. But if you want to do a gas water heater, it's like $1,200. And that increased amount, that climate fee goes into a bucket to fund 0% loans or some other thing. So we didn't talk about that with the community, but I don't think what we have here is like mutually exclusive from, you know, investigating something like that in the future.
In the future. And what about other types of carrots, like for instance, expedited permitting or other types of incentives that the city could provide to residents and businesses that do choose an all-electric route?
Yeah, I think permitting, streamlining, and other types of carrots are all on the table. The policy pathways really focused on like types of programs and policies that would be adopted at the council level. But like all of those pieces are essential for a smooth transition.
Oh, so those types of things don't need to be adopted by the council, like incentives, that's just within staff's discretion or the director's discretion?
I think the direction has been given to encourage electrification as much as possible. So something like you just mentioned about permitting would fall within staff's discretion to start investigating, but it would be at the council level to approve any type of permit fee, right?
Fee, but like not an incentive, like a expedited permitting. There's a difference, right?
Yeah. Like whether or not staff could move forward with expedited permitting. At this point, in talking with our permitting staff, we have very streamlined permitting. It's over the counter. It's also online.
Okay, great. Okay, those are my questions. Thanks. All right, we'll go to comments. Yeah, please. I was just about to ask, anyone have further?
Yeah, just final two questions and they're quick. In speaking with people, Andrea, let me ask, when you were doing yours in all your outreach, did you ask people who's a PG&E customer and who's a PCE customer? Did you get into that level? I did. Actually, I found out of the 17 people I spoke with, 4 PG&E customers. So here's my question. If I'm a PG&E customer, I am probably not eligible for the concierge service or the rebates from PCE. I have to be a PCE
That's correct.
customer.
You can always opt into PCE, opt back in.
Yeah, you can opt in.
PCE.
It's about a 6 to 8 month process. I've done it. So, but yeah, it's a lengthy.
Because you had opted out of PCE before?
Huh? I opted out. I'm opting back in.
Okay.
We opted out to see what the price difference was regarding PCE and PGE, and it came out, it was break even, by the way. And now we're going to go back to PCE. But I'm talking about people who I spoke with and they're PG&E customers, and so I was correct that they would not be eligible for the rebates. Okay. And one last question, and this was brought up in September and touched on a little bit here. Because I ran into a couple of landlords as well over the last few weeks. Will landlords be able to pass on their expenses? How is that done? Is the city prohibiting? I'm hearing the city's prohibiting the landlords. Can you legally do that? Or I'm just making this up?
No, I mean, I think I'm not sure about any rental protections that are in San Mateo. None.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you know, if a landlord has, you know, it's up to.
They can increase their rent. It's an open market, so they can charge more for
Right,
rent.
okay.
You know, there's some, I would say, if a landlord thinks they can get more for rent, they probably tried to get more for rent already. If
Right,
they
right. I mean,
have,
a
yeah.
market can only handle so
So
much.
much.
Anyway, and this is primarily an issue with smaller landlords too, not the big Essex or stuff like that. Okay, great. Christina, do you want to say anything? Okay, all righty. All right, so if a landlord believes it's their discretion whether they choose to absorb, pass on some of the costs, or anything like that.
It is always a landlord's discretion to establish the rent.
Right, right. And displacement, who pays for that if I'm a renter? That's a couple of questions I had today because I spoke with renters as well. I don't care. I'll speak to anybody, frankly.
That's something that would be a policy decision. And if that's something that you wanted to fold into your recommendation as a commission, then that's something that you could fold into your recommendation as a commission.
Okay.
But that definitely would be part of a policy option for council.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I don't know whether it's legal or not, but in terms of what landlords can and can't do, but I hear what you're saying, Christina. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, great. Final comments and questions, everyone?
Sure, thank you.
Commissioner.
I'll provide just some direction or thoughts on the policies. And generally, I generally support all of them, but I would say number 1, 2, and 5, if this helps to prioritize, I feel like those are the ones that the city has either dabbled in or is already, you know, involved and knowledgeable about. And I would say those are the most important to move forward with. Regarding number 3, the zero NOx, I think it's my tendency to prefer regional government to take the lead and for us to follow. But, and I just think that would be easier messaging also. And I am skeptical of those reductions that we could potentially get regarding due to compliance. But I would support it if that was what the city council wanted to move forward with. But I would want to include and have consideration of a hardship mention that was noted before as a way for residents to potentially get a waiver if needed, if costs were high on that. And then the commercial performance building standards, I think it's coming down the line. I think eventually we'll have to do it. And it's more of a question if we have the staff and resources to kick that off now.
Great. Commissioner Krantz, do you have any closing comments? Okay. Commissioner Rinsky?
Actually, I couldn't find the button. Sorry about that.
Okay, you're there. Great.
I am. No, I've been here all the time. So I agree. I think that this is important. I think, yeah, it's great if we can follow the lead on a regional level and just be compliant sort of under the coattails, but it looks like it might not happen. The only thing I would like to add is one of the comments I heard, what sounded like a bit of a regressive tax, and that was the Ashland, Oregon example of, if you're not going to do this, then we're just going to impose a fee upon you. And I think that's wrong. I think that's wrong-headed. If you decide to stick with gas, your fees are going to go up anyway because there's less subscribers in the gas realm to pay for the infrastructure. You're going to have to pick up the slack, kind of like what AT&T is doing with the phones. So yeah, I think we might want to include language just so we're clear. No draconian regressive taxes is as juicy and as really, oh great, that sounds. It's not, and I think it's going to negatively impact the citizens. Okay, thanks.
Thanks. All right, Commissioner Rinsky.
Okay, so in terms of my recommendations here, they're actually going to mirror Commissioner Michael's. I do support option 1, keeping with the Bay Area, whatever, air quality control districts deadlines. I'm not a supporter of 3. I have yet to find anybody who has supported accelerating those deadlines. On option 2, I'd like to see an exemption for hardship for the reasons I stated. And Andrea, I'm going to suggest to do more research with our contractors. And if I can get these people to speak with you, I'd be glad to do that, to do an introduction, because they were pretty firm that replacement is very expensive, not new, but replacement. And I do have some concerns there. I like, and also option 5, I liked in the material. In fact, I like getting the staff to be the smartest people in the room. And if we update our buildings, that gives us a lot more knowledge of what our complex commercial residents or businesses will be going through. I thought that was very appropriate because, as I look at this, we, the city, have to get ready for this. And this is a big transition for people. We do need to do more outreach and education. I heard that. Of the 17 people I spoke with, 1 knew of it. And it's not the city, it's just getting to people is not easy. And I'd be glad, Andrea, to send you an email with some thoughts on this in terms of when I spoke with the residents, I said, well, what works for you? And they shared with me their feedback. I'm going to talk a little bit about costs. So I gave you my recommendations, 1, 2, and 5. 4, I think we need to kind of build our knowledge base on complex commercial and otherwise I'm fine with that. I would encourage more discussion with the commercial side to do that. But here is something I thought about, and this is my last comment, when I spoke with people today, I used this chart from the county that determines appliance eligibility for free appliances based on what's gross annual household income. And what I found out is many people wouldn't qualify. Many people wouldn't qualify. And so because I would show them this. This is where it's fortuitous. I ran into Robert in Kinko's today. And so I think we need to do something. I'm going to call it the middle class. I'm going to call it the missing middle class. Because it's this group of people, and this is who I heard from today, is they're juggling, I got to get a new roof, I got to put my kid through college, I got my parents moving in, I've got health expenses, I got to save for retirement, I got every other, I got insurance, every expense, and this is another one that's added on. So I thought about this. This is a little bit of a wild idea, but I'm going to put it out there, is, the city helps to subsidize, and I'm going to propose this to be cost neutral. The city helps residents by subsidizing sewer lateral line fixes by a tune of almost $7,500. So I'm going to maybe put this out here, is between 2027, when this officially goes into play, maybe for the next 5 years, that $7,500 that would have gone to sewer lateral lines, maybe goes to, I'll say, middle-class families who don't qualify on income, to help them with the cost of putting in heat pumps, be it furnace or water heater. And just put it in for maybe 5 years and then switch it back to sewer lateral lines. And I'm just looking at that from a budget neutral perspective. But I think we do need to do something with this group of people. Anyway, thank you.
Great. Commissioner Robbins, did you have anything further? Okay, great. So for me, I'm supportive of all 5 options with some caveats. On option 3 with the NOx, replacement rate going faster, I do think 2026 is too early. It's 7 months from now. If we had this ordinance, we're basically it's been a year and a half of delay since the last time we saw your beautiful faces. And that year and a half of delay has burned time that we could have used for outreach and education to get everyone ready for a 2026 deadline. So 7 months to me seems really unreasonable, unfortunately, for that new kind of policy, but I would be completely supportive of basically moving up the 2029 deadline to 2027 and having everything done in 2027. Regardless, I would want the council to memorialize in the local ordinance the regional work. I think, you know, the city attorney can get on it and look at it, but I don't think it would hurt. Cities do that all the time, that they memorialize things just in case. And so at minimum, they should memorialize the Bay Area district as it stands, but I would actually recommend moving up the date to 2027 for everything on replacement, but not 2026. On option 4, I think this is great. I love these kinds of large building requirements because, like Ryan said, you get a lot of bang for your buck. We're only talking a few hundred buildings in San Mateo, and yet we're getting 10x the climate impact of that NOx replacement. If I saw that correctly, Ryan, I mean, it was like very impressive amount of GHG reductions you can get by talking to the commercial buildings,
I'll just
assuming compliance.
caveat, that's the total, not necessarily how much you'll get from 50,000 square feet, but
Yeah.
the number is high
But it's
relatively.
high. And if we're really serious about achieving our carbon neutrality goals by 2045 or whatnot, we cannot do that without tackling commercial buildings. And so, however, like, you know, I would recommend that council plan to staff this up immediately. It probably would take about 1 FTE. Maybe you could get by with 0.75. I don't recommend going below that for an FTE position. And we could, like, that person would be instrumental in doing all of the outreach and education to those few hundred buildings, all of the coordination with PCE, et cetera, helping with the technical assistance. And that would go to Commissioner Rinsky's suggestion about skilling up city staff to be able to, you know, engage. The truth of the matter is that mandates are needed because voluntary action in the building stock community does not lead to transformational change. Having worked in this space for 9 years myself, I know that voluntary measures get about 5% of people and buildings and building owners to actually do something. Those are the leading cream of the crop people who have the financial means already to do it, where voluntary is like no big deal. But a mandate is needed to actually even just instigate the conversation about any of these things whatsoever. And so to not have any mandates is going to lead to, 1, a very poor building stock in our community that will continue to erode, 2, not hitting our climate goals, which we really do need to hit, and 3, we're just kicking the can down the line. So buck up, pay for it, pay for the staff time to really get this policy going, and the others as well. And let's actually, you know, create some transformational change in our city. And the thing about buildings and the beauty is that cities have a lot of control because it's a locally regulated thing. So this is actually a place where cities can and are being transformational. To the hardship exemption, I've personally worked on many of these and seen many of these. They can get really complicated. And from a ethical perspective, they're important, and also they don't solve the root cause problem, which is actually the people most burdened with climate impact or cost impacts or whatnot should be the ones who are benefiting from these policies first, not being exempted and being passed around so that they perpetually are being inundated with the various types of pollution or cost cutting or cost considerations or getting stuck on the gas grid as the wealthy people move off the gas grid. So I think we have to really think about how to skillfully deploy a hardship exemption and not make it some sort of loophole where we continually leave people behind by actually trying to help them through some sort of hardship exemption. It creates this really negative feedback loop. And I've seen it happen many times over. So we have to just be really skillful when making one of those. And then lastly, I do love the idea of a city incentive, you know, the sewer lateral idea that Commissioner Rinsky provided. I love that kind of idea. I don't want to like replace the sewer lateral. Like it would be great if we just had an additional one. But there's something there, right? Where it's like, how do you actually get people engaged in this in some sort of fashion quickly to achieve the reductions that we need now, because that's what I heard in this presentation, is that we're really interested in what can we do in for the reduction GHG reductions in the next 5 years, and is the city willing to contribute to pay for that? And that's a city council position. That's a city, they're elected officials, and those are the kinds of decisions they need to make. But I think the answer is yes, we have to pay for it. Otherwise, we're going to do things like pay millions or billions of dollars for, all of the climate impacts that we continually have to endure. So I think that we have to really be willing to pay for the stuff that will make our lives better, rather than continually just paying for the cleanup when our lives get destroyed by climate change. So I would urge the council to think about those things and start to reverse their thinking to get proactive. And I think in this case for buildings, because it's a locally controlled issue, the city council has a lot of ability to actually make our collective lives a lot better through these types of policies. Okay, anything else? Great. Thank you so much for this item. Doing a time check, commissioners, how do we feel? We want to forge ahead? You want to take a bit of a break? Bit of a break. All right, could we take a 10-minute break? Right now it is 9:40, so we'll come back at 9:50 for Andrea's second item. Thank you, everyone. All righty. Hi, everyone. All right. Thanks so much for joining us after our 10-minute break. Thank you to Andrea and to Ryan for that wonderful presentation and guiding the commission through all of our questions and feedback. So we have our next item, which is item 2, Climate Action Plan Annual Progress Report. And
A
so
quick
with that-
question before we proceed.
Oh,
Yeah,
Commissioner Krantz, are you okay?
I am. I'll make it real quick. So my wife is home and I can't guarantee the sterility of the room that I'm in. So that, and I have an early morning doctor's appointment. So if it's okay with you, it looks like we have a quorum. I'm going to sign off. I will look at this YouTube tomorrow. And quick question, am I Brown acted from talking to anybody else about this tomorrow if I have questions?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't believe so.
If not,
No.
I'll talk with Matt and get his input on it. But thank you,
Okay.
everyone. I will.
Got it. Thank you. Thank
look
you,
at this
Commissioner
tomorrow.
Krantz. You're excused.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay. So with that, Andrea, presentation on the Climate Action Plan Annual Progress Report. Thank you.
Great. Good evening. I'm Andrea Chow with the City Manager's Office, and I have tonight a brief presentation on our Climate Action Plan, our annual progress report. And this year, it's a little bit funny because last year I came to you so late in the year, so some of this might be familiar, but let me dive in. So our Climate Action Plan was updated and adopted in 2020 with a more recent technical update for alignment with our general plan this past year in 2024. One great way to highlight our accomplishments and opportunities with our climate action work is providing these annual progress reports, both to Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission and to City Council. So the attachment to the agenda report includes a lot of different stats and qualitative data points to delve through, but this presentation highlights just a few of those. So starting with REACH codes, the City Council adopted in January 2025 an energy performance REACH code for new construction that requires energy compliance margins for new buildings. So resulting in lower carbon buildings. This was an ordinance REACH code approach that did appear before the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission last year, in fall of last year, received City Council approval in January, and I'm glad to report received California Energy Commission approval in April. So it's able to be enforced now. And that this applies to the 2022 code cycle, which will close at the end of this year. In terms of Green City Fleet, we've got a blue sky council priority to electrify the city's fleet. And we're continuing to procure new electric equipment. The fleet currently contains 15 electric units, and we need a lot of infrastructure to keep supporting this transition. And there has been a great amount of headway and progress made of designing and planning for infrastructure at our 3 sites that house the most city vehicles. And so I've provided a lot of detail, but I'm excited that our City Hall project has moved forward through the PG&E Rule 29 program. And so we're expecting to install 12 level 2 charging ports to support the fleet vehicles that are housed here. I'm hopeful that project moves swiftly, and we'll be before council hopefully soon with an easement. For the corporation yard, we're moving through a different program called the PG&E EV Fleet Program. This program requires a commitment to purchase medium and heavy duty electric units. So we're able to get a rebate for those units when we purchase them, and then also planning to install 12 level 2 charging ports in addition to the infrastructure we already have at that site. And both of these programs utilize or are structured in that PG&E is providing to the meter infrastructure, and then the city then is responsible for the behind the meter infrastructure design and installation of the EV chargers. So on May 5th, just recently, the City Council approved the PG&E EV Fleets Program terms and conditions. So that was one step towards program progress, and I'm hopeful that we'll be taking more steps to install that infrastructure. And at the police department, we've got some electric units that they're already charging there and upgrading them in the short term to faster charging or at least level 2 charging in the garage. And then figuring out the long-term solution to support more EV charging for the mini vehicles at PD. In terms of publicly available electric vehicle charging, I wanted to explain a little bit about how this data is generated, and you'll see on the slide that this is a screenshot of PlugShare. And this is a crowdsourced data source, but from personal experience and driving around San Mateo and checking out these chargers, these do exist and are available to the public. I've highlighted at the top that the city does have 2 DC fast chargers and 68 level 2 charging ports now at our own city-owned facilities. And then on top of that, the list here of publicly available charging ports available throughout the community, I saw this number grow greatly from 2023. So there are 254 charging ports publicly available. That data point is from 2024 data. And then what I had captured in 2023 was 174. So just seeing growth amongst the charging ports available in the community. There are 2 pedestrian improvement projects that I wanted to highlight. One was downtown and completed winter of 2024 in 3 of our downtown parking garages, Central Parking Garage, Main Street Garage, and Second and El Camino. These projects made pedestrians and exiting vehicles more visible to each other, and the improvements are captured in the picture here, but there's better signage, audio and visual warning devices, and then convex mirrors for better visibility around the corners. And the Hillsdale High School project, the city was awarded funding for designing pedestrian safety improvements on 31st Avenue near Hillsdale High School. And the project will advance some recommended improvements that were found in a walk audit conducted by the Hillsdale High School community. Rebates are still widely available through Cal Water, through the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, our rain barrel rebate, Peninsula Clean Energy, which we've talked a bit about today, but they're still providing rebates for water heaters, HVAC, and for electric panel upgrades. So I'll go back to also reiterate that Cal Water continues to provide rebates both for water efficient equipment, and they're still running their turf replacement program for residents and businesses. And then the city continues to provide rebates for rain barrels and electric leaf blowers, and Bayrend has programs for multifamily, and just their single family program just sunset. But we saw growth in our electric leaf blower rebate over the past year, and Peninsula Clean Energy saw growth in their heat pump HVAC rebate. And I talked quite at length about our Electrify San Mateo effort, but I would be remiss not to mention it, as it is a huge priority of the City Council, a huge driver of emission reductions in our climate action plan. And so this effort has continued over the past year, and I look forward to the discussion at our City Council in providing a summary of the commission discussion and public comment that we received this evening at the June 16th City Council meeting that will discuss this project. And that concludes my presentation for this evening.
Great, thank you. Questions? Sure, go ahead, Commissioner Winsky. Thank you.
Yeah, so
Through the chair, you actually,
Sorry,
we do have
sorry.
public comment.
I'm tired. I'm so sorry. Now it's time for public comment on the item. I apologize.
We have one speaker.
A little tired.
I wanted to say 2 things about the keeping track of how we're doing as a city. You already know. stuff that you just showed in the Electrify San Mateo. Oh, I wasn't on Electrify San Mateo. I encourage you to use as many benchmarks as you can. A Sustainable San Mateo County is one, and then the greenhouse gas calculator from PCE. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone online?
No, that concludes public comment.
Okay, great. Thank you. And apologize again. All right. Commissioner questions? Go ahead. Thank you.
Andrea, on the electric leaf blower rebate, that's electric. So electric means it could be battery or it could be a plug-in electric.
That's correct.
Okay.
Since I review most of the applications, a lot of them are for battery powered.
They're more battery powered. Okay. And then my next question here, and I'm just going to put this out, is in speaking with residents today, they notice that there are, for example, private parking lots that are empty at night. And they said, oh, could the city put together, is there a way to get them to have EV charging stations at night and then use, their use during the day, whatever it is, an office complex, a place of worship? Do we have any, is that something we ever look into, we, the city, in terms of doing an inventory of vacant lots? I'll say lots that are vacant possibly at night, people come in and charge and then they leave.
So I will say that there is a current Blue Sky priority to focus on electric vehicle infrastructure access, especially to multifamily, and to considering
Right.
using the city's right of way for charging. It gets a bit complicated. The city can't dictate what a private property owner does.
Right, I mean, I'm looking at
with their
some sort of
property.
like partnership, but if we use city assets and they're throughout if we use city property throughout the entire city, that would also accomplish this. This was in the Central District and also in District 5. People are saying, oh, we have these vacant lots here at night. Could we put, one, and then they are private, but it would be some sort of partnership. But I like your idea about going through the city's inventory and seeing where we have vacant lots and where maybe EV charging stations could make sense. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Great. Other questions and comments? Thank you, Vice Chair.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for that shortened presentation. We know that you do a lot of work that may not all be incorporated in the presentation, but was in the staff report. So thank you. I also have a question and a comment. Do you have an idea of the EV charging? Obviously, just the ones city owned, if they're at capacity or how well used they are?
That's a good question. I see a lot of variability across sites. So I do have access to the usership of all the different sites. And so my gut is that the parking lots with fewer ports receive, I guess this makes sense, receive a lot of use and are often taken up. So because we have Central Garage and the library that only have 2 ports. And then we've got our newer areas of charging that have 13 ports that I just don't think receive enough drivers yet. And maybe I had considered increasing signage to direct people, because one of the issues, especially with Main Street Garage, is that the chargers are in the basement level. So I don't think everyone knows about that. So short answer, there's variability across.
Yeah, no, it's just interesting because of how many you said are in San Mateo, 254. And it just, maybe we've gotten to the point that cities don't need to subsidize the EV charging because they're being located. But that would be, depending on if they're at capacity or not. But they're being sited around the city. So it's just more of an over general thought, and how we move forward with investing in EV charging. And then just my comment, which I think is just an ongoing challenge. I may have even said it last time, but it seems I just want to encourage to do as much outreach as you could on the rebates, continue, because it looks a little bit low for number of residents, but I also know that that's really hard to market what's out there. But, some ideas like the garbage bill or utility bill are along with the e-news, which I know you do already, and you have a great website, but just continuing to think of how to get the word out. Thank you.
Great. Questions, comments? Okay. Thanks so much for the presentation, Andrea. So a couple things. Could you like in broad strokes, explain like what does the city do on sustainability outside of the buildings work and maybe the leaf blower work versus the county? I asked this because two things I was going to ask you about was like composting and then the Okapi program that I remember you talked about a couple times before. But the staff report suggests that the county is implementing them. So I was just curious if you could delineate like what are the county versus city roles when it comes to sustainability, so I can better direct future questions.
Yeah, I would say that's very dependent on the type of program or even policy. So we are lucky to partner with the County of San Mateo on their foodware ordinance specifically. I guess as an example of our more regional and county partnership on buildings is our work through and in concert with Peninsula Clean Energy to review model ordinances. And so I think questions still end up to be city specific, but we're working as a group to vet a model ordinance and talk through challenges and opportunities.
Okay, but like composting, even though the city passed an ordinance, the implementation of that ordinance is at the county.
Specifically for the compostable foodware.
Yeah,
ordinance.
compostable foodware ordinance, excuse me.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so when there's the complaints, because it's complaint driven, right? So those complaints, do county staff follow up on those complaints or do city staff?
It's county staff.
So it's a completely county led, even though it was originally a city ordinance.
Well, in order to be enforced in the city of San Mateo, we had to adopt it. So the cities that benefit from the compostable foodware ordinance also had to adopt the ordinance and an MOU with the county for enforcement. And obviously that was very attractive to us as a city because we were benefiting from a policy that was vetted with stakeholders and then came with enforcement.
Okay, fabulous. And then I noticed that there was a blue sky priority for the gas powered leaf blowers.
Yes.
Again, could you speak a little bit more in detail to that and the timeline? Because I thought we had already talked about this issue in the past, and just could you provide an update for us on it?
Sure. I think many are aware that it has had a history in San Mateo. It's been a topic that many community members are interested in the council in pursuing. And so, yes, it was it was established as a blue sky priority for the upcoming fiscal year. So moving through the process of outreach and engagement about a possible ban on the use of gas leaf blowers in the city of San Mateo will be evaluated in the upcoming fiscal year.
Okay, so what happens to the work that was done prior?
I mean, it will build upon that work. The feedback and engagement that was gained, the long list of contacts that I have that have demonstrated their interest in the topic. Like this is building upon that previous engagement.
Okay, great. And were there any other blue sky priorities that overlap with your work streams?
Yeah, so the blue sky priorities that overlap with this climate work include the gas leaf blower ban. I mentioned the interest in evaluating electric vehicle charging infrastructure for multifamily and looking at the right of way as a potential siting for future charging, decarbonization of existing buildings, greening our city fleet. And then the fifth one is around climate resilience and the development of a climate adaptation plan for sea level rise.
I was just about to ask about resilience. Could you expand upon that one a little bit more?
Yeah, so I usually I don't report on it related to climate action, but I am excited that it was several months ago now that the city council approved the city's restricted grant agreement with Caltrans for the funding of the development of a climate adaptation plan for sea level rise. So the commission and the public will see more activity related to this soon, as there was a RFP for a consultant to assist with this work. That RFP closed just recently, a couple weeks ago.
Fabulous. And the multifamily electric vehicle piece, would that come to the commission as well, or no?
At this point, I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay, great. Those are my questions. Really great. Always amazing how much we get done with your FTE, Andrea. Thank you so much. And I maintain the comment that I wish we had budget for more Andreas working on climate action. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Commissioner Robbins.
Just make one on the, whether it comes back to us or not, that coming up with EV charging for multifamily is a Gordian knot, but if you can cut it, that would be fantastic. Because sort of coming off the comment about the hundreds of public chargers, but the vast majority of users charge at home. But if you don't have it at home, then it's an issue. So yeah, Godspeed on that one. That's not easy.
I would just, if I may, add one piece that may be of interest to the commission. It's not through the city manager's office sustainability function, but through our solid waste function in Public Works. Our solid waste manager does handle the composting function for the city. And so for the businesses and for the multifamily residential, they do manage the composting and also the composting for the landscaping. And there is a compost exchange program that is managed through that function, and also ensuring that the city is purchasing sustainable and reused items such as toner cartridges, certified sustainable papers and different products, and ensures that all the departments are engaging in sustainable purchasing practices. So that's not managed through this function, it's managed through Public Works. So we don't have all of the details on that, but if that might speak to some of the questions that you had about what other things that we're doing. So I think that does put a little bit more of a dent into some of the things that we're doing, but we don't handle it through our function. And so Matt would be the contact for questions on that piece of
Absolutely.
it.
Yes. And we didn't touch bikes and had infrastructure, which also is Public Works.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, great. So that concludes the second item. Next on our agenda, are there any other reports and announcements? Yes, please. Go ahead, Vice Chair.
I'll just make an announcement that tomorrow's Bike to Wherever Day. If for whoever wants is in Burlingame, we have an Energizer station, and I'm sure there's some in San Mateo as well. So check out the map.
Fun. All right, great. Any other reports and announcements? Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Closing the meeting now.